Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei was Broken Dragon Emperor. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. This story begins with a brown-haired boy sleeping peacefully until his alarm began to ring. He looked annoyed because he did not want to get up, and he smacked the clock off the bedside table. The small boy, about 13 years old, prepared for his first day at the prestigious Kuo Academy, unaware that his life was about to change. Issei woke reluctantly, thinking that he did not feel like studying but that it was his duty. As he dressed to leave for the academy, he did not notice that someone was watching from a distance. Rias Gremory, an idol at the academy and heir of the Gremory family, observed him with curiosity and an immediate interest in getting to know him better. When Issei left the house, Rias hid to continue watching. The boy showed a visible fear when leaving. He carried a trauma related to women that would be explained later. Arriving at school, he felt the weight of many stares from the girls around him, and his anxiety grew. Amid the crowd, he stumbled and fell forward, landing near Rias. The sudden closeness triggered his trauma. He began breathing quickly and withdrew in shock. Rias reacted calmly and offered him assistance. Rias found the moment endearing and made a private note to herself that she would get to know him better. Meanwhile, Issei felt overwhelmed by the attention of so many girls, which only increased his tension. Just as he was about to enter the academy gates, a bully approached, speaking in a loud, authoritative tone and insulting him. Issei ignored the taunts, which made the bully angrier. The bully grabbed Issei and declared that he was in charge, threatening violence, but Issei reacted with a sudden, precise defensive move that knocked the bully to the ground. Everyone watched in astonishment as a small boy easily overpowered the school's aggressive troublemaker. Issei walked away without further comment. Issei thought that an arrogant bully was nothing compared to the challenges he had faced before. He moved through the academy halls with a cold, determined expression and one troubling thought on his mind. The presence of so many female faces intensified his discomfort. He tripped again and ended up close to Akino Himejima, the second idol of the academy and a leading figure in Rias's circle. Embarrassed and blushing, Issei ran away before Akino could speak. Akino found his clumsiness charming and decided that if Rias had taken an interest in him, she would not make things easy for her. Later, Issei went to the director's office. The director, a tall woman with a serious and imposing presence, greeted him kindly and handed him a sheet with his schedule, teachers, and classroom assignment. Issei thanked her and left. He proceeded to his assigned classroom, which was Class 2B. The teacher asked him to introduce himself. Issei gave his name and expressed hope that they would get along. The teacher directed him to sit next to Tuju Kaneko, a quiet, petite girl who raised her hand to indicate the seat. Issei sat beside Kaneko, who only blushed at his presence. Throughout the lessons, Kaneko observed Issei closely and took notes to pass along to Rias later. During physical education, Kaneko thought he was very cute. Her face reddened as she watched him. Issei pushed himself hard during the running exercises and, after reaching the finish line, collapsed from exhaustion. The sudden fainting caused concern. Rias, who was nearby, rushed over and helped him to his feet, showing sincere concern for his condition. They had been in a compromising situation that stirred anger among the students. Issei regained consciousness for a few seconds but then fainted again. He was quickly taken to the infirmary by the teacher's orders. Rias could not stay, so she left Akino to care for him. Akino thought Issei looked handsome and began to understand why Rias was concerned, but she resolved not to make things easy. She felt a noticeable blush. At that moment, the brown-haired Issei experienced a blurry flashback of his childhood. In the memory, he was a 4- or 5-year-old child restrained and being beaten by a woman. The woman told him he had been very bad and deserved punishment. The boy begged her not to hurt him. A siren wailed, and the woman told him she would never leave him. Issei jolted awake from the memory. He came to with tears and a small trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth, which startled Akino. Akino asked in an anxious tone what was wrong. Issei replied coldly that it was none of her concern, then left the infirmary, surprising Aquino, who had never seen that side of him. At 3 p.m., in the occult club room, Rias observed him carefully. Rias noted that he appeared fragile and explained that, from Aquino's report, he might have psychological issues linked to his childhood. Rias decided she would investigate to uncover the truth. By 5 p.m., at the Hyoudou residence, Issei muttered to himself in distress, nearly crying as he wondered why the memory had returned. He did not notice someone watching from a distance. As he reached for the door, he fainted. Kaneko rushed forward to help him as he fell to the floor. At 7 p.m., back at the occult club, Rias considered the situation. She found his innocence and vulnerability striking and, grateful that Kaneko had brought him to the club, resolved to learn more about him and to determine how best to help or to use that knowledge for her plans. The redhead watched the brown-haired boy with a mischievous smile, her thoughts hidden behind that expression. Issei found himself in darkness and wondered where he was and what had happened. As he spoke in a noticeably angry tone, the place suddenly filled with fire. A massive red dragoon appeared and stared intently at him. The dragoon told Issei that he seemed more than ready to receive his power, the power of the legendary Red Dragoon Emperor. Issei stared in surprise and stammered that he did not understand. The dragoon walked away, promising they would meet again and that Issei would like the surprise, calling him an idiot with luck. Issei grew increasingly disturbed and demanded to know when they would meet again and what the dragoon meant. The dragoon replied that he would explain everything in time and then disappeared, leaving Issei alone in the darkness as he slowly woke. Later that evening at the old academy building, Rias prepared to wake Issei. She had intended to spend time with him and had been looking forward to it. When Issei finally woke, he blushed and trembled, apologizing nervously to his senpai. Rias reassured him in a tender tone and then embraced him briefly before composing herself. Issei remained flustered and exhausted. He worried about preventing future harm and gradually fell asleep, still unsettled. Unseen nearby, a dark-haired girl with purple eyes observed them. She noted that Issei had appeared and decided she would not allow Rias to reincarnate him because he might become a threat to her people. She felt conflicted about what to do but ultimately left the scene, uncertain and troubled. Time passed. In the early morning at the Hyoudou residence, Rias was still keeping Issei close. Issei thought that her behavior was inappropriate and resolved to keep his distance, though he also found it difficult to leave the comfort he had just known. As he lingered, a long, slender hand stroked his hair and startled him. He stood up quickly, but before he could fully react, someone firmly grabbed him, holding him close in a way that made him uncomfortable. Rias, half awake and drowsy, told him not to be so abrupt. In his panic to free himself, Issei flailed and only made the situation more chaotic, which caused Rias to cry out unexpectedly. Issei showed signs of discomfort and embarrassment and begged for help. A brief, neutral pause followed as everyone tried to calm down and sort out what had happened. Rias hugged him tightly, tearful, and told Issei to calm down and not to be afraid. She reassured him that she cared for him deeply and only wanted to protect him. Hearing that, a memory flashed through Issei's mind and made his blood run cold. He remembered a nameless woman looming over him in a panic-stricken blur, and the terror returned in a raw, stuttering cry. He remembered begging the woman, calling her nanny for mercy and promising he would be good. The memory shifted into a nightmarish image of someone threatening him with a lit cigarette and pressing it close to his face. He screamed and pleaded for it to stop. Just as he was about to see his tormentor's face, he broke free of the trance. Back in the present, the only thing Issei managed to say was that he did not want that woman. Rias, concerned, asked what had happened. He answered in a cold, tearful voice and turned away, covering his face with his hair. He went to the bathroom to wash up, leaving Rias standing there with a sad expression. Rias told him that she understood, that she knew something had happened to him, and she begged him not to fear her. She looked around Issei's room and thought it looked innocent and peaceful. Seeing the small sign on the door that said bathroom, Rias teased him gently and asked if she could come in to help. Issei responded in a trembling, embarrassed voice that boys and girls should not bathe together. Rias smiled, attempting to be playful, and suggested in a light-hearted way that she would not bite. Issei stammered that he had his reasons and tried to refuse. Issei remembered fainting at gym class earlier and being taken to the infirmary. He also recalled how he had treated Aquino harshly and resolved to apologize to her. He hoped the arrangements his parents had made allowing him to attend the newly coeducational school to help him socialize would ease his reintegration. While he considered how to make amends and rebuild connections, something soft and unexpected pressed against his back, making him startle. He froze. Rias had stepped closer and placed a reassuring, gentle hand on his shoulder. Issei tensed and tried to pull away. Fearful and overwhelmed, Rias told him to calm down and that she would not hurt him. He begged her not to hurt him and asked her to remove her hand. Rias apologized and tried to soothe him, insisting she meant no harm and only wanted to help him wash off the dirt and stress. Cornered by his own fear, Issei reluctantly agreed, asking her to be gentle. As Rias reached out to help, she noticed, to her dismay, that Issei's back was marked with many scars. The sight stunned her, sorrow filled her face. Rias felt a fierce, icy resolve. She vowed in a low, steady whisper to find whoever had hurt him and to make them face justice. Her voice was steady but her eyes were hollow with determination. Issei flinched and cried out that she was hurting him. Rias immediately withdrew, surprised and ashamed. Issei, with a trembling voice and a hint of injury at his mouth, told her not to touch him like that and left the room, walking away with difficulty and a cold distance in his posture. Rias called after him, pleading for forgiveness and apologizing repeatedly, but he did not answer. Alone, Rias examined her hands and the faint redness left by their brief contact. She felt guilty and conflicted, unsure how to reach him. Issei walked away and as he moved, a painful, blurry memory began to resurface in his mind, fragmentary and raw. A new determination took shape in him as well, and both of them separated by silence and mutual hurt prepared, in their own ways, to confront the past and try to move forward. A young boy was being struck by a woman near Rias's age. He was terrified and begged for it to stop. The woman spoke harshly that he had been bad and needed to be punished, and she grabbed him roughly. He continued to remember that moment until gentle hands pulled him away from that place. The rescuer wept and repeatedly apologized. Issei turned and saw Rias crying without stopping. Issei felt compassion despite being unable to meet her eyes. With trembling hands and a scared voice, he offered a hesitant, tender hug and apologized to Rias, telling her not to feel bad and that he was sorry for treating her poorly. Rias blushed so deeply that her red hair seemed pale compared to her flushed face. She calmed herself, smiled faintly, and reassured him that it was all right. Rias held him gently and told him not to fear her, she would not hurt him and wanted to help ease his pain. Issei, ashamed but slightly more at ease, confessed in a soft, unusual calm that Rias had helped him speak and feel more confident around certain people and had helped him confront a difficult past. He thanked her and then asked, somewhat nervously, if they could be friends. Issei asked first and Rias warmly accepted. She hugged him tighter, moved by the moment. He felt a surge of panic at the intensity of emotions but did not want to upset her. He coughed weakly and murmured that it was only a minor medical issue, nothing serious. Rias grew worried and asked if he was all right. He tried to hide it, insisting it was nothing to worry about. As a demon, Rias had an easier time sensing human emotions and noticed he was holding something back, but before she could press further she remembered the time and urged him to hurry. They needed to get ready for school. They both dressed. While preparing, I briefly caught sight of Rias changing and immediately looked away, embarrassed. Rias then asked him for a small favor with a strap on her clothing. Issei, startled, agreed and helped her nervously. He fumbled slightly, apologized, and Rias comforted him, saying it was okay, that it had been her fault, and that he should not fear her, she only wanted to be his friend. Issei spoke with a cool voice for a moment, then asked again if they could truly be friends. Rias answered yes with easy warmth. They left the house together. From Rias's point of view, he had been so shy and gentle that the sight of him blushing made her think he was charming. She cared for him and wanted to support him in the right ways. They ate at a cafe. Before arriving at the academy, they passed a florist. Issei remembered how he had treated Aquino poorly and resolved to apologize. Nervous but determined, he stepped into the florist and bought 2 bouquets, one of deep black roses and another of vivid red roses, almost the color of Rias's hair. When he returned outside with the bundles, he saw 2 men flirting with Rias and making unwelcome remarks. He felt anger and concern welling up as he rushed to her side. Unforgettable. Issei did not want his friend to be treated that way, but 2 men nearby made lewd remarks that provoked his anger. His brown eyes flashed green as he dropped the roses to the ground and moved toward Rias. Issei spoke in a cold voice, warning that if they laid a hand on even her hair, he would make them regret it. The 2 men laughed mockingly and continued their aggression toward Rias. They were rough with her face as they tried to force a kiss. Issei reacted instantly, striking the first man in the stomach and sending him sprawling to the ground. The blow was hard and decisive. The second man drew a knife and lunged. He scratched Rias' cheek, leaving her stunned. The injury was not described in detail, but it was clear Rias had been hurt. A brief, tense silence followed. Rias' expression went blank for a moment, the only thought in her mind burning as fierce determination. She charged at the second attacker with surprising force, driving him back before he could continue his assault. He, still furious and protective, told Rias firmly that she should step back and let him handle the situation. Rias protested through tears that he had been hurt, but Issei insisted that what mattered was that the men had tried to harm her and he would deal with them. A short neutral pause in the action followed. The first attacker rose and lunged at Rias again, but as he moved, Issei's anger surged and something awakened within him. Rias recognized the change and realized that Issei had tapped into his sacred gear, the legendary power of the Red Dragoon. Issei's arm glowed as the sacred gear activated in a second stage, enveloping him up to the elbow. The aura and energy felt like something out of a legend. Issei dashed forward with announced energy, his gauntlet shining as he unleashed a charge strike that knocked the first attacker down. The impact was powerful but described in a non-graphic, anime-like way. The man flew back and collapsed, unconscious. Rias watched, astonished at Issei's strength and the scale of his sacred gear. Issei performed a second charge and sped after the fleeing second man. The attacker begged and pleaded, terrified and promising not to cause trouble, but Issei ignored him and struck twice in quick succession, leaving the attacker unconscious as well. He then hurried back to Rias, anxious and gentle despite his rage, asking if she was all right and making sure she had not been seriously hurt. Rias, trembling and teary, reassured him and tried to comfort him in return. Rias wrapped Issei in a consoling embrace, holding him close to calm him. She told him not to worry and that she would protect him. Issei stammered and tried to respond, and then, almost as if noticing something strange attached to his arm, he glanced down and discovered the sacred gear device. He cursed softly at the odd appearance of the device and muttered about how it resembled some sort of cosplay apparatus. Rias, still shocked by the events, identified the sacred gear as the Red Dragoon. Issei, trying to keep composed, urged them to hurry to the academy. As they moved away, Rias cast a minor spell to daze nearby people briefly so they could leave without further trouble. When they were on the move, Issei suddenly seized the roses and fainted from exhaustion. Rias rushed to his side and held him. It became clear that the sacred gear had drained more of his energy than he realized. Rias created a small magic circle and transported them to the club room where they could be safe. Time passed. At the club room around 9 o'clock, Rias cleaned and bandaged the cut on his cheek and tended to him with worried tenderness. She brushed his hair back gently to examine the wound, but he, half asleep and still dozing, murmured about keeping his bangs in place, a sleepy promise to a sibling figure that had become a small habit. He eased back into sleep, resting his head in Rias' lap. Rias stroked his hair with affectionate care, smiling despite her concern. While asleep, Issei mumbled fragmented memories of abandonment and loss, crying quietly about past pain and the fear he felt at the school. Rias listened with a soft, comforting voice, promising that she would take care of him. Her tone remained gentle and protective. She whispered that she would make sure the person who had hurt him could no longer cause harm and that she would stand by him so nothing like that would happen again. They settled into a calm, quiet moment, Rias keeping him close as both of them recovered from the confrontation and its aftermath. The brown-haired boy lay with his head on Rias's lap, his face faintly flushed. Rias adjusted him gently to make him more comfortable. Aquino, Rias's queen and close friend, entered and teased in her typical tone that it was not fair and that she also wanted a chance to care for Issei. Rias replied in a possessive, determined tone that he belonged to her and that no one would take him away. Aquino, somewhat uncomfortable, reminded Rias that it would not be easy, since Issei, along with Kiba, was one of the most popular students at the academy. She added that the teachers were asking whether Issei was conscious yet. Rias answered calmly that he had not woken up, but she believed he would soon. Rias then moved him abruptly to check his condition more closely. The two of them inspected his clothing and found an unexpected detail, an X-shaped scar on his chest that made both of them worry. Both realized at once the significance of that mark and recognized it as the sign of a fallen angel's weapon. They exchanged looks and acknowledged the danger. Rias mentioned that he had other scars on his back as well, and Aquino suggested that they keep close watch over him. Rias insisted that she would be the one to watch him and vowed to find whoever had hurt him and make them answer for it. Rias prepared a ritual to reincarnate Issei. She asked Aquino to pass a folding chessboard-shaped box bearing the Gremory logo. Rias opened the box and took out a red pawn. They examined Issei further to be sure of his condition and then proceeded with the ritual. It took far more pawns than Rias had expected. They had to use 2 full rows of pawns for the process. After a long effort, he was fully reincarnated. Rias breathed a relieved, almost astonished remark about how many pawns had been needed, noting that it had been worth the effort because Issei would now be hers. Aquino responded with green-eyed jealousy, pointing out that while he might serve Rias, his heart was not owned. If Aquino won his favor, he might be hers instead. Rias insisted that she had cared for him and that he had smiled in his sleep when she was near. Aquino moved closer to offer him comfort as well, and Rias warned her not to lay a hand on him. The two of them exchanged sharp retorts and began a tense, physical tussle to claim the right to care for him. They pulled and argued over him for a while, each determined not to yield. Eventually both girls grew tired and paused, each holding Issei between them. They glared at one another in mutual resentment. Then Issei shifted his head slightly. The movement drew their immediate attention. Rias asserted that Issei preferred her care, while Issei remained quiet and seemed to process everything that had happened. The atmosphere stayed charged and uncertain as they all waited to see what would come next. Issei narrated what had happened. He had fought with some men who were bothering their senpai and had won. A strange gauntlet had appeared on his hand and had helped him win, but afterward he had collapsed and lost consciousness. Before his thoughts could finish, a powerful, astonished voice had reached him. A great red dragoon had spoken with a booming tone. Drake introduced himself and told Issei that, by his calculations, Issei was his most powerful partner so far. Drake explained that Issei's recharges, the boosts they used, were far stronger than normal. Where a typical wielder could manage 7 recharges, Issei's 7 were the equivalent of 100 for an ordinary partner. Drake added that this number would increase as Issei trained, rising by 6 each time, and hinted that there were still other powers inside him. Then Drake vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, leaving Issei to wake up with a start. Rias and Aquino were startled. Neither knew how to explain what had happened, so they exchanged a look and let the moment pass. Issei, disoriented and embarrassed, accidentally reached out and bumped into them, which caused both women to cry out. The sound intensified Issei's panic. He stammered and begged them not to hurt him, promising he would do whatever they asked. Rias wrapped him in a comforting embrace and told him calmly that they would not hurt him and that they were there to protect him. Aquino explained that when he had fainted they had given him warmth and attended to him. Aquino then observed that Issei seemed to have repressed memories. She recounted that when she had tried to help him before, he had avoided certain topics, suggesting a trauma connected to women. Rias realized this might explain his distant behavior toward her and resolved that she would win his trust and affection. After dressing, they noticed how late it had become and went to check on Issei. They found him unconscious and lightly injured. Rias quickly gathered him in her arms and Aquino watched with a possessive expression as the two women argued quietly over who had been most responsible for caring for him. The dispute grew tense until Issei, frightened, begged them not to fight. The plea halted them. Rias then knelt beside him, wrapped a jacket around him to keep him warm, and promised gently that she would take care of him and that he had nothing to fear. At that moment, someone opened the door and everyone tensed as the door creaked. The door opened and everyone looked toward it. Someone joked that the FBI had arrived, and Kaneko cried out in alarm, asking what was happening. Rias explained calmly that nothing was wrong. It had been very cold, and she had tried to warm him. Kaneko asked if she could not have warmed him with hot compresses. Aquino arrived and Kaneko answered that the teachers had sent her to fetch them. Rias, startled, remembered she had almost forgotten about the institute and tried to stand. He held on for a moment and then released her. Rias told him that it was not the right time, and the sound of her voice snapped Issei out of something like a trance. He rose slowly, looked shaken, and then knelt down, apologizing tearfully and thanking Rias for helping him when he had fainted. He promised to do whatever he could to make amends. Rias reassured him that there was no need to thank her, she should be the one to thank him for protecting her, and she embraced him briefly as a gesture of gratitude. He straightened, put on his shirt, and in a cold voice thanked Rias but asked her not to do that again. Everyone noticed that Issei seemed different from before. He appeared pale and coughed once, a bit of blood at the corner of his mouth drawing worried looks. Aquino's expression changed as she recalled what had happened earlier in the infirmary. He picked up a small bouquet of pink roses that had been on the floor. His demeanor shifted from cold to embarrassed as he moved toward Rias. He handed the roses to her and stammered, thanking her for being his friend and for looking after him when he had fainted. Rias smiled outwardly and felt a flush of happiness inside. She resolved to protect him and promised to care for the roses. Issei then picked up a few dark roses and offered them to Aquino, apologizing for how he had behaved and asking if she wanted to be his friend. Aquino accepted the flowers with a warm, comforting hug, holding him close to calm him. Spoke gently, encouraging him to relax. Privately, Aquino hoped he would learn to trust and rely on her. Issei remained nervous and pale, still coughing lightly, but he managed a small, childlike smile. Issei reflected that maybe girls were not as frightening as he had thought and that perhaps he could make friends beyond the one person he already trusted. He still felt a little scared, but much less so than before. He wanted to leave, and the comforting presence around him made it hard to take a step, but Rias's steady voice brought him back to himself. He thanked both Rias and Aquino and left the clubroom with a quiet thought that he might be able to live a more normal life, even if he could not completely let down his guard yet. Hungry and late, he checked his watch and hurried to his classroom. He arrived as quickly as he could and was surprised to see Kaneko already seated. The teacher scolded him lightly, but Issei produced an excuse and a signature from the principal that allowed him to take his seat. He sat without greeting anyone and began to write. Kaneko watched him and thought that Issei was a bit odd. At first she had suspected he might be perverted, but seeing his frightened, uncomfortable reaction in the presence of Rias and Aquino made her realize that he was not at ease at all. He seemed scared rather than complacent, and that changed her impression of him. He was not calm. That innocent face had started to look endearing, and those cold eyes captivated her. She wondered why she behaved that way when she saw him. Perhaps it was love. End of POV. Class continued as normal. When it ended, the same scene repeated. Everyone ate with their friends. The break had been late because there had been faculty meetings. Kaneko decided to join Issei. Issei was surprised and greeted her. Kaneko returned the greeting in her usual, extremely cold tone. Issei tried to move away, but Kaneko kept approaching until he had to relent. Kaneko asked if he wanted something and offered to share his food. Issei, a little nervous, politely declined. All the other girls envied the little girl from the academy. Besides being talented, she was spending time with the cutest boy in the school. Kaneko usually stayed cold, but she softened somewhat around Issei. Issei began to feel comfortable, so he decided to eat in peace. When Issei opened his lunch, Kaneko was surprised to see how little food he had. She felt a little guilty at her own appetite and blushed. Issei asked if Kaneko was all right. She got an idea and insisted he take a bite of her food. He hesitated but agreed. As he was about to, Rias appeared and stopped him with a smile that made her intentions clear. Rias stepped in and offered to feed Issei herself, playing up her possessive side to get his attention. She acted upset that he rarely spent time with her, and Issei explained that he was embarrassed and did not want to make her uncomfortable. Rias pressed her point, reminding him that she had helped him before and wanted some attention in return. She requested that he come sit with her to rest and calm down. Issei, blushing and embarrassed, complied and allowed himself to be comforted. Rias spoke softly, telling him to relax and not worry about what others thought. Her calm words soothed him and he began to feel more at ease. A memory returned that haunted Issei. In the flashback, a much younger brown-haired boy was being mistreated by a woman who took her anger out on him. She handled him roughly. The memory ended with the nanny striking him in a way that left him shaken. He woke suddenly, coughing and shaken from the memory. Rias, concerned, asked what had happened and whether he was all right. Issei answered in a cold voice that he was fine and tried to hide his discomfort by coughing. Rias offered to take him to the infirmary, but Issei declined and said he would go to the bathroom for a moment. Rias thought that sudden bathroom trip was strange and asked Kaneko to follow him. Kaneko agreed and began to follow. Because Issei hurried off so quickly, something slipped from his pocket and fell to the floor. It was a photo of a young Issei. Rias blushed at how cute he had been and smiled, but then noticed a girl in the photo smiling beside him and felt a flash of possessive irritation. She wondered who the girl was and decided she would have to look into it. Kaneko slipped along the side of the boys' restroom and saw Issei go inside. She was shocked to find him clearly unwell and vomiting in the stall. He looked pale and distressed. Kaneko felt alarmed and worried, not wanting him to be hurt. From inside the stall, Issei began to cry and mutter that the memories had returned and that he was sorry to his parents. He also said he would make sure the person responsible could not hurt others again. Kaneko was stunned and wondered what secret he was hiding. She decided they needed to tell the student council president. Startled by her own reaction, she tripped and fell, making a loud noise. He heard the commotion and rushed out, then convinced himself it had been his imagination when he saw nothing. He walked the halls toward Rias, but she was not there. His smile faded into disappointment. He felt as if he had failed to make real friends. He sat beneath a tree and sulked, kicking a small stone. A voice called to him. Ika Kiryu sat down beside him and asked why he looked so down and whether Rias had spent time with someone else instead. Issei did not answer immediately. Ika introduced herself and asked for his name. Issei confirmed he was Issei Hyoudou. She told him to call her Ika. They continued talking, and Ika asked what his relationship with Rias was. Issei, thinking carefully, replied that they were just classmates and nothing more. Ika said she had heard the other girl call them just friends and that she had even seen that girl put Issei on her lap. Issei froze. Ika told him it was fine if he did not want to explain. When Issei stood to go to the living room, Ika followed and asked if he wanted to be her friend. Issei agreed. Ika surprised him by hugging him. He felt awkward but did not pull away. Ika then chatted lightly, and Issei went along. They walked together. In the occult club room, Rias and Kaneko were piecing together details about the trauma they had recently uncovered. Akino arrived and added her opinion. Then Akino asked if anyone had seen Issei. Rias suddenly remembered that she had stood up and felt foolish. Akino and Kaneko admitted the same. The three decided to look for him. They were surprised to find Issei with Kiryu-chan. Rias wondered what that girl was doing with Issei and felt a surge of jealousy. The three young women hurried toward him, all determined to sort things out. Unnoticed by them, a black-haired girl watched from a distance and promised herself that she would eliminate this threat. The three continued searching and soon saw Issei and Ika together in the Academy Cafe, each with an ice cream and smiling. Akino, Rias, and Kaneko all felt a sudden, sharp pang of jealousy at the sight. Rias reacted strongly inside, convinced that he should be hers. Ika calmly pointed out that I looked happy and that she had only helped him. Aika reminded Rias that she had left Ai alone earlier and that she had succeeded in making him smile. Aquino asked Issei to choose between them. Just as Issei was about to speak, Matsuda barged in and shoved him, knocking him to the floor. Matsuda complained loudly about the situation and tried to cause trouble. Rias stepped forward and struck Matsuda, but in the commotion an accidental blow landed on Issei, tearing part of his shirt and leaving him with a scrape. Kaneko, aiming at Matsuda, also accidentally struck Issei. He staggered to his feet with difficulty and forced a small, tired smile. Kaneko rushed over to apologize profusely. Rias hugged Ai carefully and cried, apologizing for what had happened and blaming herself. Groggy but steady, reassured them that it was all right and told them to relax. Aika told Rias to let him go. Aquino said she wanted to help as well, but Rias insisted that Issei needed to rest. The school bell rang, they tended to Issei's minor injuries in the infirmary, and then classes continued as normal. After classes, Rias watched Issei from a distance and spoke to Aquino, estimating that Issei's power would awaken that night. Aquino looked forward to spending more time with him. Rias privately vowed that she would be the one to be close to Issei. Back in the occult club, Rias asked Kaneko to keep an eye on him. Rias thought of Ai fondly, promising to make up for what had happened. Issei walked away unaware that a pale-haired girl observed him from afar. Kaneko commented that Issei was cute and gentle. Issei continued walking. From another academy, a black-haired girl approached Issei. She introduced herself as Yuma and asked him out. Kaneko was stunned by the sudden request. Embarrassed and hopeful, looked for a sign from his mother in his mind. At that exact moment he slipped from a tree in surprise. Kaneko interpreted the fall as a sign and Issei, shy and flustered, accepted the invitation. Kaneko insisted this had to be reported to the president. She opened a small magic circle and communicated the situation to Rias, who reacted with cold determination. Yuma offered her number to Issei, and he gave his in return. At the occult club, Rias felt a sharp, possessive jealousy when she learned of the date. Aquino shared the tension, reacting with equally intense feelings. Kaneko reminded them that the meeting was at 3 in the afternoon, and the club members prepared in a flurry of nervous energy. Rias ordered Aquino and Kaneko to watch the club and went to change. She donned a long black jacket with a hood that shaded her eyes, a white sweater, black pants, and black boots, leaving a fringe of hair to partially conceal her blue eyes. Issei appeared at the rendezvous dressed in a dark blazer, presenting a composed, formal presence. From a distance, Rias watched him with conflicted emotions and a determined expression. When the meeting time arrived, Issei waited until Yuma arrived. They shared a pleasant walk to a nearby cafe, where Yuma reflected inwardly on Issei's kindness and on the difficult order she had been given, unsure of how to reconcile the two. Rias watched them from across the room, alert and tense. They later visited a clothing store. Issei tried on clothes and made a quick change. While adjusting his outfit, Yuma noticed an X-shaped scar on his torso and recognized it as a mark connected to her sister's past actions. The discovery unsettled her and added a complicated layer to the meeting. They continued their outing without further incident. As the afternoon turned to early evening, the three paused in a park. Yuma enjoyed the gentle time with Ai but remained bound by orders she could not ignore. In a quiet, emotional moment, Yuma asked whether Issei would be willing to give his life for her. Issei, moved by her vulnerability, expressed that he would protect her and trusted her, offering himself without hesitation. The exchange was heartfelt and solemn, softened into quiet devotion rather than any romantic excess. Rias, monitoring the situation, moved quickly to analyze the emerging danger. Suddenly, Yuma's expression shifted and a transformation began. Alarmed, Rias rushed toward them to intervene. Issei, startled into instinct, felt his latent power respond. A glove he had carried activated and a voice named Drake urged him to focus and recharge in the tense moment. Issei concentrated and prepared a controlled energy discharge. Rias reacted with decisive speed, releasing a focused burst of energy in an attempt to shield Issei. Turned and glimpsed Rias in the fray, frozen briefly by the unexpected complication. Yuma showed visible pain and remorse as she explained that she felt trapped by orders and by the danger he represented given certain powers he possessed. She expressed regret and begged for understanding. He, weary but composed, accepted the truth of the situation and told her not to cause harm over him. Yuma, shaken by his goodness and the kindness he had shown her, could not carry out the fatal order. Rias closed the distance, shouting a stern command to stop the confrontation and protect Issei. Issei reacted instinctively to pull Yuma out of harm's way, pushing her aside as Rias closed in. In the chaos, Issei's attention snapped to a familiar figure from painful memories, his former nanny. Old emotions flared, and Issei unleashed a sudden, powerful recharge of energy in response. The former nanny evaded the attack, and the scene hung on the edge between conflict and restraint. The encounter ended in a tense stalemate, each participant shaken and breathing hard. The park settled into uneasy silence as they processed what had occurred, aware that the consequences of that afternoon would reach beyond a single meeting. The nanny taunted them, saying Rias had been lucky that her own prey had saved her and calling it pathetic. She moved a spear at Issei, leaving him collapsed and gravely injured. Yuma was shocked. Rias ran forward and lifted Ai from the floor, blood staining his clothes. Rias, furious and whispering threats, told the fallen angel to run if he did not want to die, and Yuma fled. The room filled with a crimson glow. Rias demanded to know about the other fallen angel's sister. The nanny replied that the girl was no longer her sister. Rias coldly noted that this removed any reason to hesitate. The nanny then revealed that she had been the one who cared for Issei as a child and the one responsible for the scars he bore. Enraged, Rias unleashed a sphere of energy. The attack struck the nanny and overwhelmed her in a burst of destructive force. The aftermath left the area ruined. Rias disappeared through a magic circle with the wounded Issei in her arms. Yuma watched from a distance with tears in his eyes. A red magic circle opened later. Aquino and Kaneko were sitting in the occult club sharing coffee. The sight that greeted them made them spill their cups in shock. Aquino called anxiously for Issei. Rias, serious and still stained with blood, was holding Ai and instructed Aquino to prepare a bed and a room while Kaneko fetched the potions. Rias explained that they needed to heal him quickly because she intended to reincarnate him. The gauntlet of the red dragon, Drake, still lay outside. Drake urged them to treat Issei carefully, emphasizing that his partner was special. Rias acknowledged this and insisted on taking charge of the healing. The gauntlet then vanished. Aquino prepared the room and Kaneko gathered the remedies. Rias entered with Issei and closed the door. Aquino looked uneasy, and Kaneko sat nearby eating fries with a quietly jealous expression. Aquino privately vowed to protect Issei and be the one to care for him. In the room, Rias had prepared several potions in a cauldron. She had already completed most of the remedies needed to stabilize him. Gently, she loosened the torn clothing to reach the wound. The injury was large, but the description of it remained clinical rather than graphic. Rias applied the potions to his hands and abdomen with focused care, treating him with a steady, determined hand. He made a small sound. Rias flushed at the sign of life and continued her work with even greater urgency. Issei's thoughts drifted inward in a quiet, melancholic reflection. He considered what it felt like to face death, to have never fully loved anyone, and to wonder what his parents would think wherever they might be. He regretted not having a happy family or another chance to see a particular woman again. He reflected on the irony of being defeated by the woman he had sworn to destroy. While Issei was still caught between consciousness and dream, Drake appeared and Issei recognized the dragon. Drake introduced himself and advised patience, telling Ai that when he awoke he would learn to control his powers. Issei felt confused by the revelations that his mentor was a demon and that Yuma had been a fallen angel, but he resolved to let events unfold and look for answers when he regained full awareness. Back in the club, Rias continued applying the final restorative potions with careful attention until the treatment was complete. Aquino moved toward the room but was stopped briefly by Kaneko at the door. The president had asked that others not enter alone. Aquino negotiated playfully for a snack and then entered. She knelt by Issei and produced the missing vial of potion from a small magic circle, administering it to finish the healing. She steadied and supported him until signs of recovery appeared. Inside his mind, he concentrated and managed to move a hand. The small movement caused his hand to come to rest against Aquino's sleeve, and Aquino blushed quietly at the contact. The motion was minor but enough to indicate that life was returning and that awakening was near. Issei found himself abruptly pulled into another dimension. His clothing had been torn in the transfer, and he pushed at the strange, soft surface around him, disoriented. Aquino moved to stand behind him to offer support, and she guided him gently as he tried to get his bearings. Rias watched from a distance, a chilling certainty burning in her eyes that someone was doing something to her. She searched until she found her chest of potions and, grabbing what she needed, opened a magic circle and teleported to the occult clubroom. When she arrived, she nearly lost her composure. Rias demanded to know what was happening. Kaneko, looking ashamed and chewing on a snack, admitted quietly that she had been bribed. Rias warned that Aquino would hear about this, and then she kicked the door open and stormed inside. Aquino turned slowly to face Rias, her expression stubborn. Rias accused Aquino of taking advantage of Issei while he was vulnerable. Aquino answered defiantly that Issei had chosen a real form and that she was only helping to heal him. The argument became heated, with Rias insisting that Issei belonged to no one except her and Aquino refusing to back down. Rias demanded that Aquino release Issei and threatened consequences if she did not. Aquino responded that Issei seemed comfortable and she would not make him uncomfortable while he was recovering. Across town, Rias was crying behind a tree. She could not stop thinking about Issei. He had saved her when she was supposed to kill him, and the guilt at not having properly thanked him weighed on her. Determined to make amends, she resolved to find Issei, apologize, and care for him until they could be happy together. She set her plan in motion and approached House Rias could not make large, showy magic circles without drawing attention, so she used a quiet method to enter through the window. With a careful flick of her fingernail, she slipped the glass open and broke her way in without making a sound. Once inside, she opened the refrigerator, gathered some ingredients, and began to cook, intending to present a calm, domestic presence so she could be near him. Back at the occult club, the tension between Rias and Aquino continued. Rias cast a brief spell to knock Aquino back from the bed, and Ace slipped free from the fall. Aquino cursed and scrambled, but before she could act further, he reached out without thinking and clung to Rias as if seeking comfort. Rias smiled softly and returned the embrace in a tender, protective way, holding him steady and calming him. Issei, half convinced he was still dreaming, tested his hands and found he could move them. He relaxed into Rias's arms. Rias responded by cradling him gently as she tended to his wounds and channeled healing energy through him. Aquino bristled with frustration and leaped back onto the bed, declaring she wanted to take part. Rias warned that he was tired and needed rest, but Aquino tried to insist. Before Aquino could do more, he tightened his hold on Rias. Rias, amused and affectionate, refused to let go and referred to him fondly as her little pawn. Eventually, Rias grew drowsy from the effort and said she was going to Issei's house to make sure he would be more comfortable there. Aquino asked whether Rias still had the old photograph of Issei as a child with a girl who had pigtails. Rias's expression turned serious as she vowed that no one would take Issei from her. Aquino wondered aloud whether that girl might be his sister, but Rias cut the question short and focused on getting Issei settled and safe. Rias finished preparing a quiet meal at House 7 and waited, hoping her plan to be near I would finally bring them closer. The situation remained tense in the occult club, with loyalties and intentions unresolved. To be continued. The narrator had investigated Issei and found that he had no siblings and lived alone. While Reina waited, Rias announced she was leaving and Aquino offered to accompany her because she did not want to leave Issei unattended. Kaneko heard this and rushed off, determined to protect the vulnerable Issei. At Issei's house, Reina stood in the living room and sensed a magic circle. Her instincts sharpened as she told herself that she felt their presence and that the intruders had arrived. Rias noted that Aquino had felt it as well, and Aquino confirmed it. Rias attempted to tell Aquino to watch Issei, but the conversation was cut short when the door opened and Reina entered. Ryanair confronted them with a threatening tone and told them she had warned them not to interfere with her Issei. Aquino asked what Reina wanted and whether she intended to apologize to Issei. Rias reacted fiercely, and the tension escalated into combat. Rias manifested a destructive sphere tied to her clan, and Reina produced a spear of light. They launched their attacks at each other. Issei sprang up from the bed and threw himself into the fray to protect those present. Aquino tried to catch him but could not. Issei coughed and, groggy, begged them not to continue fighting and said that Yuma had accepted the apology. Amid the clash, Issei collapsed to the floor. Everyone rushed to assist the weakened Issei. Issei lay badly hurt on the floor. Rias shouted in fury that she would kill them, but Aquino urged calm and insisted they needed to focus on healing Issei rather than argue. The others fell silent and left when Rias ordered them out, understanding from her expression that she meant it. Rias remained alone with the injured and unconscious Issei. Rias tended to Issei, channeling her energy to stabilize him and doing everything she could to help him recover. Downstairs, Aquino and Reina argued tense words about the food prepared for Issei, with Aquino accusing the meal of being tampered with and Reina denying any intent to harm him. The argument ended without resolution, and they both left the room. Far away, in another city, a tall, slender girl with distinctive pink hair prepared to leave her home. She wore a hooded jacket that shadowed her face and carried a black backpack and 2 large bags filled with equipment. It was around 1 in the morning. She stepped out into the night, pulled out her phone, and checked the time. Yuno whispered that she had finally found Ai and would not let him go. Issei remained unconscious, still curled in Rias's arms. Rias felt content to have him to herself, and he rested against her in a peaceful, innocent way. Downstairs, Ryanair and Aquino exchanged tense looks. Aquino reached for a spoon to taste the food Rias had prepared for Issei. Ryanair demanded that she drop the spoon and not put it in his bowl. Aquino refused. Ryanair summoned a spear of light while Aquino gathered a thunderous charge in her hand. Both readied themselves to intervene. Kaneko arrived with a serious expression and asked where her senpai was. The others said he was with Rias, who was taking care of him. Kaneko reprimanded them for being careless and ran toward Issei's room to check on him. They followed and opened the door to find Rias holding a wiki. Rias asked what they wanted. Kaneko explained that she had come to make sure he had not been harmed and that everyone should keep him safe. The others agreed. Yuno thought that she had finally found Ai and would not let him go. She had tracked the city and school through contacts, removed obstacles to obtain information, and secured a device that could open portals. When she activated the magic circle and looked at the special phone she had obtained, her calm turned to anger after reading an entry from the diary of the future. Issei was unconscious in his room with several girls caring for him. Determined that she alone should be with him, Yuno stepped through the portal and arrived in Kuo City at 2 in the morning. She moved through the Yakuza neighborhood, purchased supplies, and bought a short katana with a black hilt. She kept telling herself that if the diary was true, she needed to be prepared for anything. Back at the house, Rias told the others they could leave. Kaneko insisted they must prevent anyone from harming Issei, and Aquino and Ryanair agreed. They stayed to watch over him. He suddenly woke and cried out for Yuno. At that moment, Yuno opened the door and entered. Yuno noticed a feminine scent in the air and scanned the room. Rias sensed a terrible presence, dressed quickly, and descended with a long katana in hand. The two stood face to face in the hallway. Yuno demanded to know who Rias was and what she was doing in Issei's house. Rias answered that she could ask the same and warned Yuno to leave if she did not want trouble. Both drew their katanas and advanced. Their blades met with bright sparks and a rapid, stylized exchange of strikes. Each matched the other's skill. Rias had superior nocturnal vision and agility, while Yuno used greater reach and strength. They traded blows in a fierce, choreographed clash. A glancing strike grazed Yuno's cheek and left a mark. Rias received a hit on her face as well. Emotions flared as each accused the other of interfering with Issei, voices full of possessiveness and resolve. The duel escalated until a powerful collision sent their swords skidding across the floor. They closed in and continued the fight with fists and swift, athletic moves, as if in an intense action scene. Yuno landed a punch that rattled Rias, and Rias countered with a precise blow that nearly unbalanced Yuno. Yuno followed, with a strong kick that staggered Rias. Neither woman would back down. The struggle continued with unrelenting intensity. The air hummed with tension. The two women collided in a flash of furious, stylized motion, grappling and trading blows like an intense anime showdown. Everyone watched. Then Issei rose to her feet. He murmured something before losing consciousness, his voice barely audible as he reached out. He had told her that he had thought they cared for each other, that he had believed they were friends, and that he had given his heart. Yuno snapped out of her trance and, seeing him, froze in horror. Issei, with his final breath, whispered Yuno's name. Yuno fell apart and ran away sobbing. Rias lunged and grabbed Yuno's leg to hold her back, but Yuno broke free and fled. The others tried to follow, but Rias held them back, insisting that they would act at the right time. Yuno ran until she reached an empty alley and collapsed into tears, shouting in grief about what she had done. She repeated her regret over and over, her voice breaking, until it became a strained, desperate murmur. She saw her hands and the stains on her clothes and felt overwhelmed by guilt. She called herself a fool for thinking she had been hurt by someone who had always protected others. Her despair grew into a fierce resolve. He still needed her, and she had to save him. She gathered her things and walked on like a somnambulist, repeating that she had to save a. At Issei's place, he lay gravely injured and barely conscious, his body showing the severity of the attack. Rias and the others hurried to his side and surrounded him, tears falling. Rias vowed that she would not let him die and that she would hold whoever had done this accountable. Aquino urged them to hurry and heal him, and Ryanair agreed through her tears. Kaneko expressed her worry and readiness to help. Rias, grim and determined, said they had to take Issei to the underworld's medical facilities because he would not last where they were. Meanwhile, Yuno remained in deep despair, haunted by what she had seen and feeling responsible. Her sorrow had twisted into a dangerous intensity, but it hardened into a single purpose. She had to save Issei. He lay near death in a corridor as Rias carried him, frustration and fear overwhelming her. In her anguish, Rias swore that she would make the person responsible pay. Aquino, frightened, pointed out that they had no potions left. Rias repeated that they had to take him to the underworld immediately. A magical circle opened and they traveled to the Gremory territory. Lord Gremory received them at the clan hall. Aquino explained the situation while Rias held Issei in her arms. Lord Gremory was stunned by the extent of what had happened to the young man who served his daughter. He ordered Rias to take Issei straight to the hospital in the Gremory territory. Rias said she would, and she added that he would be more than a servant, he would be her future partner. Lord Gremory hesitated, reminding her that A came from a lower class and suggesting she consider a more suitable match. Rias glared back with quiet pride and revealed that he was the legendary Red Dragoon Emperor. Lord Gremory was taken aback, realizing the significance of who stood before them and that this powerful warrior being on their side could be an important match for his daughter. He said he would consider the matter. The father asked how Issei had been so badly hurt. Aquino admitted, with great distress, that she had unintentionally caused an injury during the confrontation. Lord Gremory reproved her and moved quickly to arrange medical care. They arrived at the hospital, and emergency nurses placed Issei on a stretcher and rushed him into the operating theater. The others pleaded to go in, but Lord Gremory insisted they wait. The surgeons needed space to work. They sat in the waiting room, paralyzed by fear. The operation, aided by the underworld's advanced medical magic, took only 2 hours. When the nurse came out, everyone looked at her with bated breath. The nurse reported that Issei had survived the operation but remained in critical condition. Relief flooded the room. Rias wept tears of joy, convinced that he would recover. Aquino, Ryanair, and Kaneko joined in their emotional relief. Rias then went into the intensive care unit to be the one visitor allowed with Issei, staying close as he rested and as they all hoped for his recovery. A broken Yuno walked through the ruined alleys, tears tracing lines down her face. She pleaded in her mind for Issei's forgiveness, saying she could not continue without him. An old man approached and issued a threat. He lunged at her. Yuno reacted with a swift, precise strike that incapacitated him. The man, gasping, recognized her as the legendary Pink Death, the Yakuza assassin Yuno Gasai. Yuno warned him coldly that she would be the one to punish him for what he had attempted. He begged her not to leave her mark, but she left him defeated and motionless on the ground and walked away. Yuno took out her phone, a device that showed glimpses of the future. The vision that appeared enraged her, coming out of an operating room, close to Rias, and resentful at what had happened. Yuno pleaded to Issei in her heart, asking why. In a private moment, Yuno apologized to Issei for letting her anger control her and asked for his forgiveness for all she had done. She vowed to protect him and to stay by his side, promising that one day they would be together no matter how long it took. Knowing she had been wrong, she resolved to make amends in small ways and decided to buy him something meaningful. Late at night she went to a music store. The shopkeeper greeted her and asked what she needed. Yuno requested the finest electric guitar and the best amplifier available. She purchased a Les Paul and a powerful amp, then left with the instrument and equipment packed among her bags. She checked into a hotel and began to plan how she would watch over Issei from the shadows and be ready when he recovered. Meanwhile, Rias entered the hospital corridor with a face that barely hid her anger, accompanied by a nurse. Her mind had been consumed by one thought: to find and punish Yuno for what had been done to her. The nurse led her to the room, and when Rias saw Issei, she crumpled, barely able to hold back tears. The nurse left them alone. Rias rushed to Issei's side, apologizing through her tears for the protection she had provided. He lay small and fragile on the bed, his face bandaged, breathing with assistance and connected to monitors and medication. Rias sat quietly and waited until morning. Before dawn, a presence named Drake offered Issei words of encouragement, reminding him that he was the Sekiryoki, the legendary Red Dragon, and that he could not give up. Drake told him to hold on to hope and that some things would be explained in time. Although confused, he felt a spark of reassurance from those words. When Ike finally woke, the first thing he saw was Rias leaning over him, her uniform stained with blood but otherwise intact. Rias, crying, told him not to worry about the mess and that what mattered was that he was alive. Issei tried to repay the hospital expenses, but Rias dismissed the matter for now, thinking quietly that he would repay her in another way later. Rias explained to Issei that he truly possessed the dragon gear of the Red Dragon. She made clear that she was not human but a demon heir of the Gremory clan, and that Issei was one of her pieces, her pawn. Rias revealed that in order to reincarnate him, she had used both of her rows of pawns, something usually reserved only for the highest class. She had done it because she wanted him to be strong. He thanked her, embarrassed but determined, and promised to be her good pawn and to become her strongest piece. Rias blushed and, with a mix of relief and affection, hugged him gently. Issei made a small protesting sound, and Rias released him to check that he was all right. He assured her he was, at least on the surface, and held to that promise as they both faced the uncertain road ahead. Inside, he was crying from the pain. The nurse told Rias that she should leave because Ai needed to be left in peace. As soon as the two of them left, he began to cry out in pain, repeating that it hurt very much, that nobody loved him, that he was useless, that he was a burden to senpai, and that he felt like a vegetable. Rias returned and immediately noticed Ai trying to stop his crying. Rias told him not to hide his pain and urged him to let it out. She said that she should be the one suffering instead and that she would not laugh at him. She wrapped him in a comforting embrace and asked him to let everything out, apologizing for feeling responsible for his condition. Issei tried to hold back but could not. He sobbed that it hurt so much and that he was worthless, that he was only a problem for her and wished he were gone. Rias struggled to hold back her own tears, but she could not, and both of them cried, he from pain and helplessness, she from sadness and guilt for seeing him like that. Rias felt uneasy in her blood-stained uniform and could not remove it, but she did what she could to make Issei more comfortable. She adjusted the blanket and reassured him that she would take care of him. The two of them stayed close until Ai, exhausted from the pain and the crying, finally fell into a deep, peaceful sleep against her. Rias covered him with the hospital blanket so he could rest. Rias looked at him as he slept and thought about how much she cared for him and how he had defended her. She decided to watch over him while he rested. At that moment, someone opened the door. The nurse entered again, accompanied by Aquino and Kaneko. The nurse looked shocked at the scene, and the other girls rushed forward to check on Issei. Rias quickly explained that he needed rest, and the staff and friends gathered around to make sure he was all right. Later, Yuno prepared alone. She cursed the red-haired woman who had taken what Yuno called her baby and vowed that she would make her pay. Yuno acknowledged that Rias was a worthy opponent and that she needed to be ready. She believed she could defeat any assistance Rias might bring. She fled to the shower to calm herself and then sat on the bed to plan. Memories of the earlier fight came back to her, remembering how she had gravely wounded Ai during their confrontation. She wept and begged for forgiveness, vowing to find him and atone for what she had done. Determined, Yuno began to draft a plan and prepared a large white sign as the first step in executing it. Yuno began writing and planning. She suspected the red-haired woman had taken Issei to a hospital and that they were treating him there. Yuno told herself she needed a plan to bring Issei back. She would have to appear calm and ordinary. Issei was probably weak, so she needed to get medicine and good quality food. She resolved to control his portions to preserve privacy. To keep them hidden, she would find a place the red-haired woman could not locate. Yuno would observe, pick a safe spot, and wait for the right moment when Issei was alone. She vowed to protect him and do everything she could to keep him safe and happy. Yuno closed the door and left wearing her usual clothes. At that moment, in the hospital room, everyone confronted Rias. The others shouted for Rias to let go of Issei, and Rias calmly replied that Ai was resting. Aquino spoke with a serious tone and demanded that Rias release him, insisting they would not allow anyone to take him while he was vulnerable. Rias maintained that she would never harm Issei. In her thoughts, Rias felt frustrated that the interruption had ruined a quiet moment. Rias lay with Issei on her chest. The nurse instructed Rias to get down so the boy could be fed properly. Rias refused, explaining that Ai was weak and exhausted and needed to rest. Rain suddenly lunged forward and pulled the blanket away, revealing the small brown-haired boy comfortably lying against Rias. Rain moved quickly to take Issei into safer care. Kaneko and Aquino watched the scene alongside the nurse, who nearly dropped her tray in surprise. Rain wrapped Ai gently in a blanket and tended to his bandages, making sure he was secure and comfortable. He let out a small sound of pain but remained asleep. Rias held a hidden knife and threatened him, and Ryanair did not step back, moving to take it from her. Rias raised her hand as if to strike, but the sleeping Ai tightened his grip on Rias with surprising strength. Rias blushed and her expression shifted into a mischievous grin. Rias laughed softly and teased that this was how he liked to sleep, then said they would rest together every night, calling him her little pawn. Ryanair watched, and everyone observed how comfortably Issei lay. He woke up suddenly and nearly fainted at the sight. Rias explained everything and Issei calmed down. The nurse told him they would remove the bandages from his face, and Issei agreed. Everyone watched as the nurse worked. When she finished, Rias suppressed her worry like the others. When Issei looked at himself in the mirror, he felt he resembled a poorly made version of a killer. He looked the same, except for a scar that ran from the corner of his lip to his cheek. Rias reassured him that it did not matter. Issei dropped the mirror and began to cry. Everyone rushed to help him, and Rias hugged him, but his sobs did not stop. To be continued. They saw a small brown-haired boy devastated on the floor, crying. A red-headed girl held him and offered comfort. Rias told him to be calm and that it was not as visible as he feared. He replied that it was not that simple. Nobody seemed to love him, and the one who had claimed to care had left him bedridden and marked by a terrible scar. Rias hugged him tightly and whispered that no one there would judge him and that he should let out his sorrow. Issei hesitated, calling for his senior, but Rias insisted that as his guardian it was her duty to console him. He gave in and cried against her shoulder until he grew drowsy. Rias stroked his hair and hoped he was comfortable. She promised herself she would take good care of him in other ways later, then rose when his stomach rumbled. He held on briefly, but she gently set him into the bed and apologized for leaving, saying she would return to check on him later that night. She went out to buy some food and was met outside by her friends. Aquino asked why Rias had left Issei alone, and Rias explained that he needed to be fed. The nurse appeared carrying a tray, confirming that she had brought food already, and Rias accompanied her down the long corridor toward Issei's room. Meanwhile, Rainer had teleported to Issei's house and immediately felt a heavy sadness and an unsettling presence. She went on guard and discovered Hyoudou lurking there. Hyoudou had left the hotel and taken up residence at the house. She had decided to come because she believed Issei would arrive and she did not want the redhead and her friends interfering. Rainer sensed danger and prepared herself. Hyoudou stepped forward with a cold, demanding demeanor and drew a large knife. Rainer answered with steady resolve and drew a lance of light to defend the house. Someone hurled a knife. Rainer dodged and faced Hyoudou squarely. Hyoudou demanded to know where Issei was in a threatening tone. Rainer refused to tell her and warned her to leave, insisting she would not allow Hyoudou to harm Issei. The confrontation escalated, Hyoudou lunged, and Rainer narrowly avoided her attack. Hyoudou attempted to teleport but failed to catch up and tumbled over the nearby fence. She swore that she would hunt them down and then checked a device she carried that claimed to predict Issei's fate. The device's reading said Issei was being healed in the underworld, that he was no longer fully human, and that he possessed a celestial dragon. Hyoudou did not understand the implications and, dismissing the device as faulty, pocketed it. On impulse she used a teleportation apparatus and typed in "underworld" as a joke. To her surprise, she materialized in a broad, beautiful meadow beneath a green sky, a place she had not expected. She sensed Issei's presence close by and steeled herself to be cautious. Back in Issei's room, a dark-haired woman named Aquino watched him as he shifted in his sleep and clutched a large pillow for comfort. Aquino, moved by the sight, sat on the edge of the bed and gently tucked a blanket around him. She told herself quietly that she would look after him and kept watch through the night, offering calm, tender care. Rias, walking down the corridor with the nurse, felt a small pang in her chest and pressed a hand there as a wave of concern passed over her. The nurse asked if she was okay. She answered that she was, but inside she remained alert. Rias thought that someone was doing something to her pawn. Rias heard Kaneko and Rainer approaching. Rainer explained everything to Rias in a hush. Rias put on an expression that frightened everyone. Rias issued a cold warning that she would make that woman pay. Rias hurried into Issei's room, furious. Aquino told Rias to calm down and to be quiet because Issei was asleep. Issei lay in his bed, sleeping peacefully and unaware. Hyoudou watched from the ventilation ducts, looking at Issei's face and crying. Seeing the others there made her furious. She wanted to attack but restrained herself, knowing they knew the building better and would humiliate her. Hyoudou saw Rias preparing to charge, but something stopped her. Rias said she sensed that woman nearby, and Aquino agreed. Issei woke abruptly, calling for his sister. Hyoudou heard this and felt her heart break, but she retreated until her presence faded. Rias steadied herself, but the calm turned possessive. Rias demanded that Aquino release her pawn, threatening severe consequences if she did not. Aquino replied calmly that Issei was peaceful and should be left to sleep. To everyone's surprise, Issei stood up, climbed down from the stretcher, and dressed in clothes that had been left for him. He thanked Aquino and Himejima and apologized for any trouble. A small trickle of blood appeared, and everyone worried, but he brushed it off as nothing. Issei said in a soft, determined voice that he had to fulfill the promise he had made and that he would go train. Rias worried that he was too weak, but Issei insisted he was fine and asked the nurse to remove the remaining bandages. The nurse obliged and gently removed the bandages from his abdomen. Rias looked at his abdomen, marked with scars. Rias and the others struggled to hold back tears, but Issei smiled and assured them that they were only marks and that it was all right. Rias hugged him. Issei pulled away, embarrassed. The others watched Rias with tired, complicated expressions. Issei dressed and left with Rias and her retinue, his expression downcast. Hyoudou watched from a distance, thinking that Rias's look was the same as it had been 7 years ago. Hyoudou felt sick remembering the torment they had endured back then. Issei's thoughts drifted to those days as well, especially the night he would never forget. Rias led Issei to a vast field and told him it belonged to her family. She was the heiress of the Gremory clan. Issei was surprised that he would train there. Rias asked if he could summon the red dragon. Issei said he would try. He focused, and the gauntlet appeared on his arm. Rias thought the gauntlet felt more powerful than the last time Hyoudou had used it. From a distance, Hyoudou flinched as memories washed over her and made her feel ill. She retched and grew pale at the memory. Issei noticed and, surprised, commented on how the gauntlet looked. Rias said she would teach him to use it. Issei concentrated. Several boosting sounds echoed as he prepared his power. Lord Gremory watched with interest, skeptical of the brown-haired boy's potential, yet impressed by what he witnessed. Rias asked Issei if he was ready, and Issei answered that he was. Issei released his power. A burst of energy filled the field and smoke rose. Everyone stared in astonishment. Issei's clothes had been damaged by the surge of magic and were no longer wearable. The others quickly covered themselves, embarrassed. Issei, ashamed, knelt and hid his face with the gauntlet, apologizing profusely. His embarrassment diffused the tension. Kaneko stepped forward, blushing, and accepted his offered red shirt. Kaneko, still shy, thanked Issei. Issei, mortified, asked to be called simply Issei. Rias appeared and, with a fierce protectiveness, scolded Kaneko for taking his shirt in a way that made Kaneko back away, fearful of Rias's intensity. Issei apologized again for the accident and offered his jacket. Rias reassured him that she would never hurt him, explaining that he had released a large amount of magic and the fabric had not held. She embraced him to comfort him. Issei tried to pull away, nervous, but Rias hugged him tighter and whispered calming words, telling him not to be afraid and thanking him for helping her. Rias took Issei's jacket and held it to her chest, overwhelmed by a rush of emotion. Aquino observed the scene with a composed demeanor. A brief scuffle began over a shirt as the girls argued about who should take it. Rias and another girl glared at each other, tense and determined. Kaneko arrived, and Ryanair was already shielding someone under her large wings. Rias put on her jacket, and passed another shirt to Aquino because Ryanair had none left. Issei, embarrassed, apologized to Ryanair that he had no more shirts. Ryanair responded kindly that at least he had tried, then hugged him and wrapped him gently in her wings for warmth. Rias and the others moved to help and adjust the clothing, ensuring everyone was properly covered. Lord Gremory watched the scene from nearby, accompanied by his wife Venelana Vale. Venelana remarked that the young man was a fine-looking youth and that Rias was fortunate. Lord Gremory admitted he had never seen a pawn with such a formidable power. He glanced toward the entrance and noticed the room beyond was in disarray, with pictures knocked from the walls. Xiaticus observed everything with a serious expression. He declared that the young man would be his daughter's partner, and he would not allow that boy to suffer as he had suffered in the past. His tone hardened, and the memory of his youth surfaced. He remembered being forced into an arranged meeting at a young age that left lasting scars and shaped how he protected others. The memory haunted him and made him determined never to let another go through what he had endured. Back in the present, Venelana laughed lightly and reminded Xiaticus not to act as if he were blameless, teasing that he had fallen asleep in her care that night. Xiaticus stiffened and admitted he preferred not to recall those details. The memories still upset him. He warned that if Rias's pawn were careless, Rias or one of her companions might treat him harshly or worse, and he would not stand for it. Venelana replied that Rias had made her own choices and that they must be respected. Hours later, at 6 p.m, a smaller boy with worn clothes and a red glove marked by faint lightning patterns stood nearby. Issei, tired but proud, acknowledged that he had succeeded in training. Drake commented that it had been a long time since he had seen such a capable companion, and thanked him for the praise. Rias asked if Issei wanted dinner, and Issei agreed without hesitation. They walked together down the path, Rias calm and supportive, lightly touching his head as they entered the mansion. Inside, Venelana greeted them cordially, and Rias acknowledged her mother. Rias inwardly wondered why Venelana addressed Issei so familiarly. Her small pawn felt like something precious and private to her. They moved into a large dining hall where everyone had gathered. Lord Gremory rose to greet Issei, surprised to see him recovered from his recent ordeal. Issei, embarrassed, thanked him politely. When Issei questioned how the family knew his name, Lord Gremory explained that the hospital where Issei had stayed belonged to their clan, so they had records of his treatment. Venelana added that Issei did not owe anything, as he was considered part of the Gremory clan by virtue of serving in Rias's retinue. Issei accepted this with humility and promised to repay their kindness by doing his best as their pawn. He sat beside Rias at the table while the other girls watched him with interest. He ate quietly, still a little awkward, and a brown-haired woman at another seat kept him in her view. The family meals continued under the warm, attentive gaze of his new household, and they resolved to become stronger for Rias and for himself. Imagine Venelana seated across the table. They were not talking, only eating, and Kiba and Jasper were not present. Venelana thought of a way to get Issei's attention and tried a subtle gesture, but nobody noticed except Rias, whose protective instincts flared. Rias thought that she knew what Venelana wanted and that she would not allow it. She watched Issei. The food tasted bland to him, and he felt as if people were staring at him, especially at his scar. He felt uncomfortable. Venelana stretched and shifted in her seat, attempting once more to draw attention. Issei looked up and felt flustered. Rias's expression turned cold. There was a tense pause as everyone waited. Kaneko stepped forward and seized Issei in an attempt to restrain him. Yuno and Rias clashed fiercely, grappling with each other as their rivalry boiled over. Rias threatened Yuno in a fierce, trembling voice for what she had done to Issei. Yuno replied that Issei belonged to her and demanded not to be touched. Lord Gremory arrived and confronted the situation, accusing Yuno of attacking Rias's pawn. Yuno admitted her action and insisted she regretted it, warning that she would not allow anyone to take Issei from her. Akino questioned Yuno's claim over Issei. Yuno answered that she had raised him for years and therefore had a right to call him hers. Rias countered that she had saved him from Yuno and a fallen angel. Tensions rose and Yuno attempted to lunge forward, but Issei moved to stop her and gripped her arm to prevent further violence. Yuno cried out in pain and then grew quiet. With weak words she asked Issei for forgiveness and begged not to be abandoned. Kaneko apologized to Issei and said she needed to talk with him. She suspected he was hiding something and intended to find out. Issei pleaded with her not to force the matter. Rias gathered a ball of energy and prepared to launch it toward Yuno, but the attack dissipated in a sudden surge. Rias, shaken, insisted she had to punish Yuno for what she had caused, but Issei intervened, stepping between them and declaring that he would decide what should happen. Silence fell as everyone considered Issei's words. Issei forgave Yuno for what had happened and asked her not to hurt anyone else. He took Yuno with him, and together they left for the Gremory residence. They arrived at the Gremory household, where the immediate danger had passed and each person began to process the night's events. What she called soothing Issei, Rias ran like a madwoman and spoke in a cold voice, accusing Yuno of taking Issei and insisting he belonged to her alone. Yuno replied in a similarly cold tone that she cared for him and criticized how Rias treated him. Rias, furious, insisted her love was real. Yuno argued that Rias's feelings were superficial, and though someone might try to stop her, Yuno believed Issei appreciated her truly. Both froze in shock, but neither realized they shared the same deadly intent. In private thought, Rias and Yuno both resolved to earn the other's trust and then eliminate her. They forced a tense smile and announced that maybe they could get along. Issei began to stir, and Yuno quickly understood what he needed. Instead of the NTMT competition that had been unfolding, both women moved to tend to him, each insisting she would be the one to make him comfortable. Rias felt a surge of rivalry at Yuno's confident manner. The two circled each other, trading barbed remarks about who knew Issei better and who had a stronger bond with him. They both declared that they would be the one to protect him and keep him close. At one point, the conversation turned heated. Yuno challenged Rias, threatening dire consequences if she did not reveal everything. Rias returned the threat in kind. Issei, still half asleep, murmured that he missed his parents and swore to find the one who had harmed them and make her pay. Yuno reacted nervously, and Rias whispered that she had once slain a fallen angel. Yuno pressed for the full story, the two women exchanging thinly veiled threats while the sleeping Issei clung to Yuno more tightly. Everyone else arrived then and saw the two women struggling over Issei's attention. The others protested playfully and with competitive heat, each claiming she should be the one looking after him. Ryanair objected that it was unfair. Aquino announced she wanted to get in on the action, and several of the others expressed similar, teasing claims. The teasing erupted into a brief scuffle as they tried to persuade who would help Issei. Suddenly Lord Gremory shouted a warning. An explosion rocked the clearing, and everyone instinctively took defensive positions. Through the smoke and debris they saw a massive, dinosaur-like creature. Rias's voice turned serious as she declared that Issei's moment had come. It was his debut as the Red Dragon. They began to dodge and coordinate, launching an organized assault. Kaneko identified the foe as a renegade demon that had slipped into Gremory territory and gone into a trance. Issei asked for clarification, and Kaneko explained that renegade demons were those who turned against their masters. Rias gave orders. She and Aquino would bind the creature, while Issei, Kaneko, and Ryanair would deliver the finishing blow. Yuno bristled at being told what to do, but kept her focus. She warned she would do it for Issei, even if she held resentment toward Rias. Issei activated his gauntlet and unleashed 7 recharges of power, surpassing his previous limit. The group watched in astonishment as that surge of energy far exceeded what he had done before. Rias and Aquino formed magical circles to restrain the creature as the others moved in. Kaneko knocked it off balance with a precise strike. Ryanair pinned it into place with a spear technique. Yuno took the blade handed to her and landed several controlled, disabling blows that neutralized the demon without causing gore. It was then Issei's turn to finish the job. He steadied himself, readying his resolve for the next move. Drake believed the attack would be more powerful and told Issei to carry it out. Issei launched at the monster, a distant shot rang out, and a red light washed over the battlefield. Smoke and dust filled the air as the blast left a vast crater. Issei, exhausted, staggered through the haze toward the others. He asked Rias if he had completed the mission and done well. Rias was about to answer but became silent from shock. Everyone present shared the same stunned reaction. Because of the explosion, Issei's clothing had been ruined, and the others immediately covered him and attended to his privacy and safety. Yuno moved quickly to help and checked that he was all right. Issei panicked over his exposure, and Yuno reassured him calmly that she would make sure no one saw him. Tensions flared as protective instincts and embarrassment collided. Rias arrived furious, accusing Yuno of crossing a line and insisting Issei was hers to protect. Yuno returned the accusation, and their argument grew heated until Aquino and Kaneko intervened, urging everyone to calm down and focus on getting Issei dressed. Lord Gremory stepped forward and took charge. A maid soon appeared with spare clothing, which Issei put on gratefully, and the group settled down to rest. That night, Issei could not sleep. He was haunted by memories and whispering voices that seemed to come from everywhere. The voices asked why he had fled, why he had allowed so many to be harmed, and whether he was forgetting them. Overwhelmed, Issei broke down and apologized, insisting he had not wanted any of it. In his mind, he saw faded images of fallen comrades' worn clothing, haunted faces, and he remembered each one by name, recalling how they had been taken from him in painful, sudden ways. He thought of Max and how he had been lost in a mine explosion at 1 p.m. The memories pressed on him like a relentless tide, each name a sharp reminder of what he had survived and what he still carried. In the infernal forest territory, at 1 a.m. in the field of despair, Issei wandered until a voice he had thought long forgotten reached him. A voice asked if he was forgetting them. Issei quietly insisted he had never forgotten. The voice, trembling, revealed itself to be his sister and accused him of killing her. Issei vehemently denied it and tried to explain that she had died in a nuclear explosion in the misty forest. The sister cried out that something else had killed her. A gloved hand bearing the Drake gauntlet appeared from nowhere. His sister, now a twisted, decayed apparition, pulled him downward toward a yawning abyss. Issei pleaded for forgiveness, but his sister declared that he would become one of them and pulled him into the darkness. Later, Issei jolted awake in a bed with a familiar presence by his side. Hyoudou, looking apologetic, sat beside him and offered a black bandage to cover his wound. She explained that it would protect the cut until the scar healed. She then spoke seriously about his sleep medication, noting that he had trouble sleeping without it. Issei insisted he had taken the pills. Hyoudou observed that when he lied he bit his lip and sweated, and she gently questioned him about a recurring nightmare of an infernal night. Issei admitted he could not deny it. Hyoudou prepared his prescribed sleeping medication and encouraged him to take it. He accepted it and soon fell asleep. Hyoudou remained close to monitor him and keep him warm so his condition would not worsen. In another room, Rias noticed someone sleeping beside Issei and went to check. Aquino joined her in the hallway. They hurried to the door and found Hyoudou resting beside Issei, covering him with a blanket while he slept. Rias reacted with anger and rushed in. Aquino followed. Hyoudou, calm and protective, covered Issei's ears to keep him from being startled. Tensions rose quickly. Rias threatened to force the issue, and Aquino prepared to intervene. Hyoudou acted to defend Issei, and a brief, sharp exchange of actions followed that resulted only in minor injuries and a sudden halt to hostilities. Hyoudou explained that she had given Issei a doctor-prescribed sleeping pill to help with his sleep disorder. She warned that the pill could significantly increase his heart rate, so a sudden shock or fright could be dangerous for him. Rias and Aquino listened, wary but attentive, and the argument cooled. Others arrived soon after and urged restraint. Kaneko reminded everyone to behave, and Hyoudou reiterated that she was only caring for Issei. After a short, tense discussion about the medication and his fragile state, everyone returned to their rooms for the night. By morning everyone rose, had breakfast, and prepared to leave the Gremory residence for the day. Hyoudou was given the academy uniform, which suited her well. She had struggled to accept the reality of demons and of Issei's changed nature, but she had come to embrace being by his side. She was determined that no one would harm him. They arrived at the academy, where Hyoudou introduced herself as a second-year student alongside Issei and Kaneko. The other students were taken aback by the presence and poise she projected. They were surprised to see Hyoudou embracing a certain brown-haired boy. Classes continued quietly, and the day seemed calm until a group of troublemakers began to cause problems. Hyoudou and Issei left the classroom together when a bespectacled student attacked and shoved the brown-haired boy to the ground, leaving him unconscious. Seeing this, Hyoudou's darker, more violent side surfaced. Issei intervened to stop her. Two students taunted them, escalating the confrontation with crude insults. Before it could get worse, a sudden strike knocked Matsuda to the ground, and Motoyama watched in shock at the sight of Hyoudou holding a large knife. Hyoudou spoke in a cold, determined tone, vowing to make them pay for what they had done to Issei. The attackers begged for mercy, but Hyoudou advanced with mechanical determination. She was about to use the knife when Issei restrained her and forced her down. Hyoudou asked why he stopped her and said she only wanted to protect him. Issei pleaded with her not to hurt anyone else. She relented and hugged him, and he allowed it. Unbeknownst to them, a red-haired woman watched from a distance and, fingernails tracing a photo of Hyoudou, muttered her bitterness under her breath. Later she summoned Issei to the occult club at 1 in the afternoon to explain his power and the factions. Hyoudou observed the room as Issei listened. Rias explained that she would teach Issei how to form magic circles and that he would need to sign contracts to join the Gremory clan. Yuma greeted him and mentioned that the Gremorys had helped her and that she would begin at the academy the next day. Issei quickly learned to form the magic circles and was given a mission to patrol a cemetery near the Gremory estate. He was pleased by the assignment because his parents were buried there. Hyoudou accompanied him. Issei cleaned his parents' graves and the two patrolled to ensure everything was in order. They noticed a woman with hair as bright as the sun and deep green eyes. The way she looked at them stirred something, and they shared a look that felt like the beginning of an unbreakable bond. They kept staring until Hyoudou nudged Issei lightly, bringing him back to the present. A nun approached and introduced herself as Asia Argento, politely asking what they were doing there. Issei explained they were tending his parents' graves. Asia apologized and stepped away, quietly feeling a strange tenderness toward him. Back at the occult club, Issei reported to Rias, who invited him to sit beside her on the couch. Rias hugged him tightly and told him he looked tired and needed to rest, adding that she enjoyed being near him. Yuno became upset and pulled Issei away. Drowsy and disoriented, Issei ended up sitting on the couch while Yuno took a seat beside him. Yuma, Kaneko and Akino arrived, and the room grew tense. Kaneko questioned what was happening, Akino urged everyone to be honest, and Ryanair reassured them that no one intended harm. Laughter masked the unease, but Yuno felt his inner turmoil deepen, torn between violent impulses and his desire to protect Issei. Suddenly, Yuno found himself in a dark space where a menacing voice seemed to whisper violent commands. He saw an alternate version of himself, an unsettling reflection with hair falling over its eyes and a tattered dark dress that radiated malice. The dark reflection declared itself to be Yuno's true self, the personality he had been trying to bury, insisting that violence was part of his nature. Yuno accused this other self of nearly destroying the one person who gave him a reason to live. The two engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand struggle until both were exhausted. The dark reflection then drew a black katana and struck, plunging the scene into darkness as a final promise echoed that Yuno would never forget. To be continued. The group considered several plot options. They wondered whether Yuno was losing the original essence of his character. They debated whether Rias should have a sister and whether Issei should have a sister. They discussed a possible confrontation between Yuno or Rias and the nanny. They explored Vala's interactions with Issei and how Alvian's presence might affect their dynamic. They considered making the leader of the fallen angels a woman and focused on her leadership and motives in a non-SXL, antagonistic role. Finally, they debated giving Issei a fierce, anime-style battle with Sursex that would leave Sursex defeated but alive. Yuno returned to the group visibly shaken, as if something had unnerved her. Issei noticed and asked if Yuno Wani-chan was all right. Yuno said she was fine. Rias cleared her throat to cover the awkward silence. The four of them exchanged glances as Akino and Kaneko arrived and greeted Issei. Issei then asked Rias if she would let him go out for a walk. Rias and Yuno both asked where he was going. Issei answered coldly that he wanted to walk alone. Yuno offered to accompany him, but Issei insisted on going by himself. Rias asked why he wore a face mask. Issei replied that it was personal and left before she could finish. Akino noted that Issei had been acting strangely, and Rias agreed. The others turned to Yuno to see if she knew anything, but Yuno rebuffed them and walked away without explanation. Issei felt that everything in his life was going wrong. He was afraid of Yuno Wani-chan in a way he could not explain, and his sister and friends had been crowding him lately. Overwhelmed, he began to cry and walked until he accidentally bumped into someone. He apologized, and when they both looked up they recognized each other and laughed at the coincidence. They decided to go to a cafe together. Asia teased Issei playfully about his feelings, and they shared a light moment. The rest unfolded much like the familiar events from earlier memories. As they left the shopping center, Issei spotted a woman who looked eerily similar to someone from his past, wearing a distinctive outfit and smiling in a way that made his skin crawl. The woman taunted him, and Issei reacted by drawing Drake to defend himself. The woman blocked his attack and delivered a blow that knocked him unconscious. Asia was frightened. The woman declared that Issei would belong to her. At that moment, Yuno, Rias, Akino, and Kaneko arrived and charged toward the woman. The four of them launched themselves at the woman, but she moved with calm precision and avoided their strikes. She dismissed them with a cold, contemptuous tone. Kaneko demanded to know what the woman had done to Issei. Akino echoed the question, and Rias stepped forward, furious and determined. The woman laughed at their efforts and taunted them further. Yuno accused the woman of having harmed Issei in the past. Rias asserted that this was her battle and asked Akino and Kaneko to create a barrier so nearby humans would not notice the conflict. Akino and Kaneko complied and raised a protective ward. As the others prepared to attack, Issei, weak but resolute, declared that the fight was his and ordered everyone to stay back. Rias began to step forward, But Yuno suddenly pressed a knife to Rias's neck and warned that no one should move unless Issei asked for help. Rias reluctantly stood down. Issei drew Drake and began to unleash a barrage of attacks, rage transforming his movements. The woman mocked him, saying he had grown but still fell short. Issei pressed forward, but she activated a seal that interrupted his weapon's charge. Drake warned that a seal had been placed, and Issei collapsed as the woman grabbed him and taunted him for lacking true hatred. Just then, a quick katana strike severed the woman's hold and released Issei. Yuno had darted in and freed him, then rushed the woman with fierce determination. She told Rias, Aquino, and Kaneko to secure Issei while she dealt with their opponent. They complied and moved to protect him. Yuno prepared to face the woman. In brief reflection, Yuno knew her advantages: great physical strength, skill with bladed weapons, and a frightening focus when she entered a trance. The woman's strengths were also clear: extensive magical experience, exceptional speed, and strong endurance. Yuno drew her katana and steeled herself, realizing that the only path to victory required letting go of restraint. An inner voice answered as if in reply, and Yuno let out a fierce, unsettling laugh that left the others startled but resolved. The confrontation began in earnest, the two combatants clashing with swift, stylized strikes and parries. The exchange was intense but non-graphic, moving like an action scene from an energetic animation as each fighter tested the other's limits. Everyone was surprised. Aquino told Issei not to move. Issei, speaking in a cold voice, warned that Yuno could kill Senpai. Everyone protested, but Issei walked on. Rias and Yuno had knives in their hands and were about to confront him, but Issei stepped between them. The situation escalated in an instant. The others stood frozen as they watched Issei with blades stuck at his shoulders. Shock spread through the room as they hurried to pull the weapons free. Rias and Yuno stumbled out of shock and saw Issei wounded. Ryanair came running, screaming Issei's name. Yuno reacted quickly and lunged toward Issei, but Rias grabbed her and held her back. Aquino tried to restrain them both, shouting for them to move away because I was badly hurt. Yuno forced her way forward and things became chaotic. In a sudden, terrible moment, Yuno struck Issei again. The group froze as Kaneko launched herself at Yuno and the others followed, but they were stopped one by one. The scene narrowed until only Yuno and one other remained. Yuno screamed that she would kill them for what they had done to her and to Issei, and that she would take Issei so they could live happily together. Rias answered that Yuno would be the one who would die and that Rias would be the one left happy. Rias lunged with a katana, aiming to stop her. Before Rias could close the distance, someone shoved her aside. Issei stepped in to protect Rias and took a heavy blow meant for her. He was severely wounded by the strike and fell, leaving Rias paralyzed with shock at the sight of him. The battle continued around the fallen Issei. Yuno, consumed by a darker side, moved in while others attacked in vain. She delivered a decisive, brutal blow that left Issei incapacitated and collapsing. The others watched in stunned silence as he lay on the ground, gravely hurt and unable to respond. Yuno laughed in a manic way that echoed through the space. Rias, horrified and desperate, tried to reach Issei, but the assault continued. Yuno advanced with a drawn katana, and the caretaker confronted her with a spear of light. They collided with extraordinary force. Sparks flew from the clash of their weapons. Yuno taunted that her opponent would not move again, and the caretaker replied coldly that Yuno's sword might hold, but it would not be enough to defeat her. They attacked again. The katana nicked the caretaker's cheek, and the caretaker returned a similar cut, and the fight accelerated. The caretaker unleashed a magical circle that trapped Yuno with chains. Yuno screamed that it was a dirty trick and accused the caretaker of trying to stop her. The caretaker said she would not kill Yuno but needed to show her something. A vision appeared that only Yuno could see, a memory of a younger Issei suffering at the hands of the caretaker. The image was meant to break Yuno's resolve. The caretaker approached and taunted Yuno, insisting that everything Yuno had fought for was ruined. Yuno, enraged, headbutt the caretaker with such force that the binding magic snapped. For the first time, the caretaker hesitated and felt fear. Yuno drew her katana in an instant and struck decisively, incapacitating the caretaker. The caretaker cried out in pain and tried to speak, insisting that the others did not understand what had happened to Issei, but Yuno ignored her. A raw, feral laugh filled the space as the confrontation reached its tragic peak. The aftermath left everyone reeling, with Rias and the others stunned by the cost of the battle and the consequences of Yuno's fury. Everyone was stunned by Yuno's overwhelming power. Yuno, battle-worn, drew her katana in seconds, approached Issei, and in a Yandere tone declared that the job was done. It was a normal day at Kuo Academy in Universe in the occult club room. Rias and Issei were together when a strange drowsiness overtook them and both fell asleep. In Universe 2, he was playing the piano with Rias at his side when everything went dark. In Universe 3, he was calmly playing an electric guitar while Rias, depressed at home, watched from afar. Then the scene faded to black. In Universe 4, Issei appeared as a lone figure in the snow with Shiro, while Rias at home felt abandoned as Issei began to forget her. The world went dark for them as well. In Universe 5, an ailing A lay in a hospital bed while Rias despaired at home. Their surroundings dimmed into shadow. In Universe 6, Issei conversed with a female Drake and with his future friend Rias when everything once again turned black. In the Grisea version universe, Issei rose quietly while Rias sharpened a blade. Their scene, too, was swallowed by darkness. In Universe 7, a sorrowful Issei sat alone in the park with Rias following him, both trailing into blackness. In Universe 8, Rias worked calmly as a maid preparing breakfast while a small, chibi waited expectantly. Their moment was cut short as darkness fell. In Universe 9, A trained for a fresh start alongside Rias while Rias wrestled with deep despair. The world around them went dark. In Universe 10, Issei, acting as a proxy, fought a strange, looming figure while Rias aided him. The encounter faded into blackness. Several hours later, Issei awoke disoriented near Rias. He wondered where he was and, surprised by how close he was to her, felt faint. He apologized awkwardly and offered to leave, but Rias, still groggy, asked him to stay a little longer. They rose and examined their surroundings. Rias held a spell to illuminate the way while Issei adjusted his gauntlet. Hand in hand, they walked down a worn, dark corridor. Rias warned that something smelled wrong and urged caution in a cold, alert voice. Issei agreed, matching her vigilance. They continued until another light appeared ahead. Instinctively, he prepared his weapon while Rias gathered a sphere of destructive magic to be ready. When the light revealed other versions of themselves, confusion erupted. The two alternate Rias reacted with surprise. One identified herself as a maid, while the other recognized a past version of herself. They questioned each other's identities until both said their name was Rias. The alternate Isseis stared at each other in bewilderment. One proposed a simple test to confirm identity by naming a favorite food. Both answered waffles and sweets, settling the matter between them. Rias of the pawn suggested they leave the place, and Rias the maid agreed. Both Rias blushed intensely at the sight of the different versions. The moment remained innocent but charged with embarrassment. They began to adjust to meeting their alternates when distant noises interrupted them. The group grew uneasy and decided not to pry into the private situation they had overheard. Rias of the pawn scolded the others for creating an indecent scene, and one of the Rias snapped back angrily that they did not understand what they had been through and asked to be left alone. Rias the maid remarked that things had gone too far. At that moment, more versions of Issei and Rias arrived, filling the corridor with tense, uncertain faces and the sense that many alternate paths had converged in one place. They saw a pink-haired girl walking while a brown-haired young man struggled between a redhead and a black-haired girl. Rias, speaking with a sharp possessiveness, told the others not to take him. Yuno, equally tense, warned that she would only wake him and that no one should touch him. Rias and Yuno nearly came to blows, but Kaneko stepped between them and scolded them both, reminding them that they needed to arrest the angel first and asking where Yuno's senior was. Yuno pointed toward a spot. Everyone looked and froze at the sight of only a stain on the ground. Rias, furious, said that the woman had slipped away again and swore she would make sure the next time would be different. Issei woke up dazed. Yuno soothed him and held him gently until he steadied himself. In a quiet recollection, Issei remembered a traumatic childhood event connected to that woman, and the memory left him shaken. Rias wrapped Issei in a comforting embrace and told him to rest. After a tense moment of arguing, Yuno, Ryanair, and Aquino backed away and released him. Issei asked about Asia. Rias explained that Asia had also been rescued and had left before he woke, thanking them for their help. The explanation calmed him, and the evening settled into a fragile quiet. Later that night, Ryanair asked Issei in a serious tone whether he had been remembering what her sister had done. Issei confirmed that he had, and Ryanair revealed with a troubled expression that her sister had watched Issei for years and had told superiors that he was special, hinting that she had been planning something big involving experiments. When others pressed for details, Ryanair admitted she did not know more. The sister had been evasive and secretive. The revelation left the group in stunned silence. Their conversation was cut short by an urgent call. Rias announced that they had finally located the man who had been conducting experiments on demons. The group moved immediately to an abandoned church. Rias warned everyone to avoid sudden movements. The enemy could strike at any moment. Just after she finished speaking, Issei shouted a warning, and a bullet struck his knee. A man disguised as a priest stepped into view and taunted them, then rushed forward to engage. Issei countered with a powerful strike that sent the attacker tumbling backward and unleashed a shockwave that damaged the church's interior. The priest, panting, claimed that if he died someone else would suffer, and then revealed a woman being held as a hostage. The sight left Issei and Yuno stunned. The priest fired at the hostage, who fell, and then activated a device that trapped her in place. The team watched in horror as the situation escalated. A deep roar echoed through the ruined sanctuary. Drake warned everyone to get clear. The fight was about to become destructive. Issei's power flared and his form shifted into a dragon-like state. He launched himself at the priest with overwhelming force. The priest's magical barriers shattered under Issei's relentless assault, and the attacker was left incapacitated. Issei then invoked a binding command and several magic circles activated around the area. A volley of enchanted firearms discharged, each impact set off tremors that rippled through the city. Rias cried out that they had to stop before the damage spread and the city suffered catastrophic destruction. She urged the others to heal the hostage so that Issei might calm down. The team moved quickly to treat her wounds and stabilize the situation. Issei stood, breathing hard, while his allies worked to contain the aftermath and ensure the hostage's recovery. He decided to finish it at once. With a brutal, decisive strike, he overwhelmed his opponent and ended the threat. He vowed he would see him in hell, then delivered the final blow. The enemy collapsed, lifeless. Rias ordered Issei to calm down and insisted the girl was fine. Issei then lost consciousness and fell. Everyone looked on as his gauntlet and his body showed serious damage. They carried him away to tend to him. All of them took Issei and Asia and left amid the chaos at the club. Rias wondered aloud how they would wake Issei and why she had been protective of Asia. Yuno said she knew a way to wake him. She had done it long ago. Kaneko, Aquino, and Ryanair demanded to know how Yuno intended to proceed. Yuno explained that she would warm and rouse him using a method she had used before, and Rias protested that she herself should be the one to help. A brief dispute arose and then was broken when Asia stirred and asked what had happened. Rias explained the situation to Asia. Asia answered that she wanted to thank Issei and approached him, then used her magic to heal him. Everyone was surprised by the strength of her power. Rias identified the power as a booster gear and told Issei that, as a demon, he now possessed it. Asia admitted that she would have difficulty praying as she used to, since her life had changed. Aquino asked how she had obtained the booster gear. Asia began to tell the story, which those familiar with their past would understand. Before long, Issei woke. Asia, tearful and grateful, told him he had been brave and that she would always be thankful for his help. Issei offered a weak laugh as they explained what had happened. He resolved to learn to control the new power. Night fell and everyone went home. Asia left with Issei, which annoyed Yuno because of the new living arrangements. At Issei's house, the group kept to household routines. Later, Asia visited and the two shared a simple, practical bath as part of the household custom. Nothing unusual followed. Yuno burst in with a threatening tone and a weapon, but Asia remained calm and explained she was only helping her housemate. Issei reminded Yuno of a promise she had made, and Yuno, remembering it, stepped back without further conflict. They all went to sleep that night. Yuno chose to stay nearby, a sign of the bonds and responsibilities among them. The next morning, everyone prepared to leave for the academy. Yuno startled them at the door but soon joined them. They walked together to school. Being part of the Gremory household had granted Asia and the others access to the academy, and Asia had their uniforms ready. At school, the girls moved through the halls confidently while Issei felt their attention from the boys around him. Nervous, Issei clutched Rias's sleeve with his small hand. Rias looked at him with a tender expression, pleased that he was beginning to trust them. Rias and Aquino said goodbye to him at the entrance. Rias pressed a quick, affectionate gesture on his cheek and teased him playfully, which left Issei flustered. Class proceeded normally until the break, when things became chaotic. Issei walked calmly through the crowd. A bully tried to corner him, but Issei fought back with surprising resolve, leaving the attacker on the ground and unable to continue harassing him. Issei, tired and frustrated by the day, thought about leaving early. Nearby, a younger boy sat quietly eating a sandwich. Two girls, one red-haired and one with dark hair, came running up excitedly and took places beside Issei, each claiming they had arrived first. Rias offered to accompany Issei and Aquino reached out to take his hand. He accepted, grateful for their support. Suddenly a stray ball struck Issei in the face, knocking him to the ground and scattering his sandwich in a comic fashion. The moment turned serious when someone nearby had been accidentally injured by a stray object and was bleeding. Rias reacted with shock when she saw blood on her blouse, and Aquino became frantic at the sight of an injured classmate. The group rushed to help and discovered that Issei was unconscious. Rias moved to check him and ordered others to call for assistance as they tended to the injured and awaited help. A voice rang out, startling everyone as the question of who had done it echoed through the crowd. All eyes turned to a small group of bullies at the edge, who laughed and claimed it was payback for what had been taken from them. The rest of the students arrived, tension building. Rias watched with a look that promised retribution. Yuno mirrored that same lethal expression while preparing for a fight. Kaneko cracked her knuckles as she observed, Aquino stretched her fingers, and Reina produced a small cutter, all ready for whatever came next. The brawl erupted. The group charged like animals into the fray. The leader of the bullies taunted them, mocking and goading the girls, which only heated tempers further. Asia tried frantically to wake Issei because she could not use her booster gear. The fight around them was brutal. A bully shoved Rias, crossing a line and escalating the situation. Issei rose to his feet with animal-like intensity. He grabbed a broken bottle and then drew a military-style knife from his jacket, moving with a controlled, dangerous focus. He advanced without shouting, his face a mask, driven by a fierce, restrained anger. The bully dropped Rias and drew his own blade, trying to intimidate them and threatening that once he finished with Issei he would come for Rias. Yuno was about to rush in, but Issei spoke coldly and warned her to stand down. Yuno remembered a promise she had made and reluctantly let him handle it, though Asia pleaded nervously for someone to stop him. Issei moved. The onlookers expected a noisy clash, but his actions were swift and precise, almost mechanical. He struck to disarm and incapacitate, neutralizing the bully's weapon and putting the man out of the fight. The bully resisted at first, but Issei used a combination of holds and strikes that left him crumpled and stunned, unable to continue. Issei showed no outward expression, only a steely calm that unnerved everyone watching. Just as Issei was about to finish the confrontation, Yuno shouted a reminder of the promise, and Issei let go, pulling back from a more extreme act. In the brief moment of distraction, the defeated bully managed to land a hard blow to Issei's head. The strike was forceful and left Issei dazed and injured, forcing him to collapse to the ground. The immediate violence subsided into the shock of what had just happened, and people began to process the consequences of the fight. Yuno launched himself forward and declared that he would finish what Issei had started. He struck the man across the face and knocked him to the floor. The man curled up and began to cry in humiliation. The school principal arrived and demanded to know what was happening. Rias thought that the situation had gone terribly wrong. They quickly took Issei to the infirmary and bandaged his head. With his head wrapped, Issei told Hyoudou not to interfere when he was handling things. Hyoudou nodded and explained that his intervention had been to prevent Issei from killing the other student. Issei asked what would happen to them. Rias reassured him that everything was under control, that they would be fine. She held him to calm him and thanked him for protecting her. She returned the gesture with a brief, grateful touch. The principal caught them and ordered Mrs. Gremory to detach herself from Issei. Rias stepped away after a stern reprimand, and they were left to think over their behavior. Asia was also there. They all sat in a row, grumbling. Hyoudou sat at the back sketching a butcher shop in his notebook, and Rianair had doodled something silly about the principal. Issei rested his head on the desk and fell asleep, then began to remember. After some time they were released from the detention room and went to the occult club. Everyone sat quietly until a silver-haired girl in a maid outfit entered and reminded Rias Gremory about a commitment with the Phoenix family. A blonde man with a leering expression followed and addressed Rias as if she were his. Rias glared at him. The man sat at her side and reached toward her. Rias was ready to react, but Issei intervened fiercely, making it clear he would not let anyone treat her as an object and that he was willing to fight to protect the club president. Others tried to calm the situation and asked him to wait, but Issei refused and challenged the man without hesitation. Phoenix accepted the challenge and they moved to the school courtyard, which had already been prepared. Phoenix provoked Issei with taunts, but Issei remained silent and focused. He called on Drake and prepared himself. Their ally Gafia warned that it was not the time and begged the Red Emperor to wait, but Issei tightened his resolve and told them not to stand in his way. The nanny appeared then and, with a serious gesture, transferred part of her training to Issei, unlocking hidden strength within him. Phoenix launched an attack with a spear of light. Issei, relying on his gauntlet, met the assault and countered without pausing. He moved with uncanny anticipation, matching and blocking every strike. Observers watched in stunned silence. As Phoenix grew exhausted, Issei gathered his energy and unleashed a powerful charge that sent Phoenix flying across the courtyard. The Phoenix healing began to take effect as Phoenix struggled to recover. Phoenix tested Issei with a burst of light that briefly made bystanders think Issei had been struck down. Rias froze in shock and Hyoudou was on the verge of losing control. Suddenly, Phoenix moved toward Rias with malicious intent. The students rushed to intervene and stop him. Just as the situation threatened to spiral further out of control, a dragon's roar echoed through the courtyard, halting everything. Issei was about to leave when a spear struck out at him, thrown by the dying Phoenix. He turned and, with silent precision, countered the attack and subdued the foe. Holding up the fallen enemy's crest like a trophy, Issei remarked with ironic satisfaction that it was his first prize, then kicked the defeated combatant aside. He asked coldly who had won. The Mao who had arrived answered nervously that Issei had won and begged not to be killed. Issei then walked toward his president, Rias, and told her in a gentle voice that he had succeeded and completed his duty. He could not finish speaking. He collapsed onto Rias's chest. Everyone looked as they found him on the floor with torn clothing and his booster gear ruined. After the battle, Issei had been badly injured. Unconscious, he had been taken to an underworld hospital to be healed. Later he was left in Rias's care so he could recover peacefully. One night, Rias slipped through the window and found Issei sleeping and still troubled. She asked the Red Dragon, Drake, how she could help. Drake explained that Issei needed a rare restorative treatment that required a special healing ritual. Rias volunteered to undergo the ritual to help him. A brief, non-invasive healing ritual was performed, and it eased his pain and allowed him to rest. By morning, Issei opened his eyes groggy and disoriented, wondering where he was and why it smelled comforting in the room. Rias, still by his side, explained everything that had happened. Embarrassed and grateful, Issei hugged her tightly and released the emotions he had been holding in, crying into her shoulder as he apologized and vowed to repay her kindness. Rias knelt beside him and promised that she would protect him and that he should ask for help whenever he needed it. Issei timidly admitted that he liked sleeping beside her and felt safe when she hugged him. Rias understood and held him close. Issei fell asleep again and rested calmly, feeling protected in a way he had not in a long time. Suddenly the door was flung open and a thrown knife clattered into the room. An intruder lunged for them, shouting threats. Hyoudou sprang forward and drew a blade to defend them. Before the fight escalated, others intervened and warned against needless violence, insisting that Issei needed rest. The would-be attackers, confronted and intimidated, backed down. Issei stood up with a bright smile and insisted that he was fine, asking everyone not to fight and suggesting they go have breakfast because it was already late for school. Everyone swarmed him with protective affection, but Issei gently pulled away, dressed, ate with them, and then left for school. His companions were overly protective because of his bandaged arm. In class he copied notes with difficulty, and Kaneko, Asia, and Hyoudou helped him where they could. Hyoudou privately reflected that since that fight she had felt as though someone had been watching them. There was a different scent in the air, now feminine and unfamiliar, and she had a bad feeling. She resolved to be ready after classes, to take out her tools and prepare for whatever threat had nearly cost Issei his life. She swore to do whatever it took to protect him and to confront that danger. From a distance, a white-haired figure observed them from a tree. She noted the rumors that this rival was powerful and that he had been involved in bringing the attacker to justice. She decided she would test Issei Hyoudou herself to see whether he was worthy or merely a boastful pretender. If he proved himself in combat, the matter would be settled. Classes continued and everything was calm until recess. Issei went to the third-year classroom to find Rias and Aquino, accompanied by Kaneko, Asia, Hyoudou, and Rainar. When he entered, all the girls rushed to greet him and noticed the bandages on his right arm. One of the girls asked if he was all right and another offered to help, but Issei attempted to explain that he had fallen and was fine when he was interrupted by the sudden presence of Rias and Aquino, who approached with sharp, possessive intensity. Issei mustered his courage and walked over to Rias to greet her, asking nervously and blushing if they could walk together. Rias did not answer with words. She hugged him tightly and pressed him close, showing a deep, almost frantic affection. Issei tried to pull back, but Hyoudou intervened and scolded that this was a school, not a place for impropriety. Rias insisted that she had only hugged him because he needed comfort. Aquino, Asia, Rainar, and Kaneko separated them to calm the scene and they continued down the corridor. Aquino later reflected that since the fight with Phoenix, Rias had been acting differently, more attached to Issei and behaving in ways that suggested she was worried or overly protective. Aquino decided to keep an eye on the situation because she cared about Issei. They sat down to eat, and for a while everything was quiet. Then Rias produced a thermos and, with a playful expression, offered Issei a homemade drink she claimed was particularly good. Issei accepted it innocently and enjoyed the sweet, refreshing taste. He complimented the drink and asked if there was more, and Rias replied that she had more stored away. Hyoudou found something about the situation peculiar, but did not make a scene. Suddenly a figure dressed entirely in black and wearing a mask appeared in the room. The figure's voice was cold and demanding as he asked who Issei Hyoudou was. Issei stood up calmly and answered with equal coldness. Hyoudou drew a knife instinctively, ready to defend, but decided to hold back and observe. The masked figure then revealed himself as a rival, calling himself the White Emperor Dragon, and challenged Issei to a battle to prove whether he was worthy of his booster gear. Issei accepted the challenge and Rias immediately began preparations. The duel was set for 3 in the afternoon. At 3, only Issei and Rias were present in the occult club room. The others were busy organizing things around the school. Rias spoke seriously with Issei and warned him that accepting a fight in his current condition could be deadly and that she would never forgive herself if something happened to him. Issei replied with determination that he had accepted because he believed he could fight at his best. A glowing relic manifested in Issei's hand and issued a warning. His body was severely damaged, and to fight at full capacity he would need proper support and recovery. Issei hesitated at first but, acknowledging the risk, agreed to receive help. Rias led him to the club's infirmary and assisted him in cleaning and dressing his wounds, tending to him carefully and offering comforting words. They used the facilities to help him recover enough to stand and continue. Once they were finished, Issei dressed and steeled himself for the upcoming duel. Rias stayed close, ready to support him, and they headed out to face the White Emperor Dragon. Everyone watched as Issei and the White Dragon charged at each other. The impacts echoed like thunder, and energy flared with each strike. Drake explained that the White Dragon's power was the opposite of the Red Dragon's. The Red could tap into seemingly limitless power, while the White could absorb energy. Issei realized his system might overload and allowed himself to take hits while Rias prepared to pull him out. Hyoudou, cold and possessive, insisted that Issei had a plan and warned the others to wait, threatening the opponent if the tactic failed. Hyoudou also noted that the rival was female. As Issei endured the assault, a familiar guiding voice urged him to show what he had prepared. He activated his balance breaker, summoned magic circles and the weapons he carried, and pushed back, testing whether the dragon could really absorb his attacks. The battle intensified with a series of sudden boosts, and the White Dragon conceded that Issei was a worthy rival but still had room to grow. Issei launched himself and struck a powerful blow. Both combatants pushed each other to their limits. Armor and defenses cracked under the force of their exchange. Valley watched Issei's performance with interest, thinking he would make a strong pupil, while Alvian warned Valley that continuing might kill him if they pushed too far. Valley refused to relent, and the two traded another devastating exchange that culminated in a massive shockwave and a cloud of smoke. When the smoke cleared, everyone rushed forward. Issei and the White Dragon lay collapsed and exhausted from the clash, disheveled but alive. The White Dragon stirred and spoke, asserting that the fight had reached a standstill and that Issei had ended up in a compromising position on her chest. Alvian pointed out that Issei had been driven to unconsciousness because his body could not handle the strain. Rias shouted angrily and moved to confront the situation. The others gathered around Issei to tend to him, using medical and booster equipment. A dispute erupted over who would be responsible for his care. Valley criticized Rias for not providing enough attention to his recovery, and the argument quickly grew heated. Hyoudou demanded explanations from Rias, and tensions flared until Valley intervened and separated Asia and the others. Valley declared that she would take responsibility for Issei's training and care, insisting he needed a competent teacher and a guardian who could properly guide him. Rias protested, claiming she was the rightful caretaker, but Valley calmly asserted her decision and reminded everyone that she would treat him with respect. A short, tense scuffle followed as Rias attempted to force the issue, but Valley easily overpowered her and opened a magic circle to prepare for the next step. Valley announced she would bring Issei to her location at 6 and repeated that she would not mistreat him, only train and protect him. She left, and the others were left stunned. Rias reacted with a dramatic, anguished cry and then broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the turn of events. A brief time later, after arrangements were made, Issei arrived at Vala's home where she intended to begin his discipline training and rehabilitation. Vala prepared the training space and evaluated Issei's condition calmly, determined to bring out his full potential through rigorous instruction. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the aftermath of the battle caused chaos and uproar as everyone reacted to the news and tried to sort out the consequences. At the academy field, chaos threatened to erupt as Hyoudou and Rias prepared to come to blows. Kaneko and Aquino intervened to separate them, and Rias insisted that now was not the time to fight. They had to go to the underworld to find him. Reluctantly, Hyoudou and Rias agreed and set out. Meanwhile, Issei was asleep in Vala's house, weak and unaware of the commotion. Vala watched over him with concern and decided to focus on getting him stronger. Back at the Gremory residence, Rias paced anxiously while Hyoudou's temper simmered close to bursting. Hyoudou accused Rias of failing to protect Issei and of allowing the White Dragon to take him, and the accusation erupted into a violent outburst. Aquino and Kaneko forced Hyoudou back before things escalated further. Lord Gremory provided the location of Vala's domain, and the group prepared to move out immediately. Issei woke and Vala put him through a brutal training regimen to rebuild his strength. 1,000 push-ups, a 300-meter sprint in under a minute, 1,000 sit-ups, 1,000 squats, 1,000 pull-ups, combat drills, and dragging 2 massive truck tires filled with stones. He also carried Vala at times while wearing weighted bands on his hands and feet. Vala pushed him unrelentingly to ensure he would not remain weak. Vala challenged Issei to lift a tower-sized stone as a test of his power. He strained and nearly broke under the effort, but Vala demonstrated how to summon and control the balance breaker properly. She told him he had to master the vestal power and concentrate to bring it under his control. Once he focused, he performed the task much more easily. Training gave way to sparring, and the fight between Vala and Ai became a tremendous, anime-like clash. Their blows caused tremors and their gear was shattered in the intensity of the exchange. During the confrontation, an accidental close contact occurred that briefly heightened the tension. The moment passed and those details were not dwelt upon. Rias and the others arrived just as the fight threatened to spiral out of control. Rias lunged at Vala in fury, but Vala moved to block and defuse the attack. The women at the scene attempted by every means to rouse Issei while Rias shouted accusations. Vala countered the assault and knocked Rias back to prevent further violence. Issei rose to his feet and intervened, firmly instructing Hyoudou not to harm Vala. At his voice, Vala's demeanor shifted. She apologized and showed a SBMSSV calm, surprising everyone present. Vala produced clothing from a magic circle and dressed herself. Then Rias retrieved clothes for Issei and helped him into them. When Issei stood, everyone was taken aback by how much stronger and more imposing he appeared after the training. Some of the group reacted with audible admiration. Tensions remained, but the immediate confrontation had been halted. The search would continue, and preparations were already underway for the next steps. To be continued. Issei changed his clothes awkwardly. He asked Rias why she had his clothes, and Rias replied that they were her things. Issei nodded and everyone laughed. He then asked where Hyoudou was and Rias said that Hyoudou had gone out. Issei assumed Hyoudou would be at home as usual, so he did not worry. He stood and walked slowly toward Rias, but when he reached her he stumbled and fell into her arms, startling everyone. Hyoudou stood a short distance away and looked at the door of Issei's house with a melancholic expression. He thought about how he had to do whatever was necessary to protect Issei and that his next actions might worry him, but he intended to return soon. Hyoudou slipped a note under the door and left, saying to himself that he would come back in 2 weeks for intense training. While Issei handled errands for Rias, he was sent to negotiate contracts. He walked toward a large, luxurious house where he had been specifically summoned. Inside, he was unexpectedly restrained and blindfolded. He felt fear and uncertainty as he realized he had walked into a trap. A woman entered. She revealed an imposing presence with multiple wings and a dark halo, and she spoke in a low, compelling voice. She identified herself as Vale and said that she had summoned him to discuss a deal and to offer valuable information about his power. Vale attempted to coerce him into cooperating, but Issei refused. He ignited his inner power, the dragon's energy, and used it to free himself from his bindings. Vale commented on his strength and then revealed a more intimidating form, spreading her wings. She spoke of sealing a pact that another had failed to complete, and she tightened the pressure around him in an attempt to force compliance. Back at the occult club, Rias grew frantic as she searched for Issei. She told Aquino that she could not ignore the pull she felt to find him. Aquino, Ryanair, Kaneko, and Asia agreed to join her. Valley arrived and, with her usual bluntness, demanded to know where her partner was. Rias declared that Issei was hers, sparking a tense moment among them, but Aquino urged everyone to focus on finding him rather than arguing. They all set out together. Rias tracked Issei's signal and arrived just as Vale was attempting to pressure him into a deal. Rias intervened with fierce determination and demanded that Vale release Issei. Valley also stepped forward to protect him. Rias quickly untied Issei, and he clung to her, saying that he was scared and wanted to leave. Rias held him close, comforting him and calming him down. The group gathered around Issei to make sure he was all right. Rias offered him food and a quiet place to rest. The others voiced concern and rivalry over who would take care of him, but their words expressed worry rather than malice. They all agreed to give Issei space and privacy while he recovered from the frightening encounter. The situation ended with Issei safe and the group united in their resolve to protect him. Vale shook Issei awake and spoke in a more serious tone, saying that she had to explain something. Vale explained that Issei's nanny had been a fallen angel who had subjected him to harsh training not out of cruelty but because his body needed to become stronger. The red dragon and the other booster gear implanted in him had been wearing him down. Issei reacted with anger and shock and demanded to know why his parents had been killed. Vale answered that his uncles, the policemen, had shot his parents, and it was not the result of her fall, a fact Issei already suspected. Issei fell silent as the pieces began to fit together and asked for more information. Vale told him to be patient and that she would explain everything in time. She then suggested in a lighter tone that if they played a little she would tell him what he wanted to know. Issei asked innocently what game they should play, and Vale made a playful suggestion that was omitted here. A brief neutral pause followed as they changed the topic and continued the conversation. Issei wore an expression of deep confusion. Nearby, Aquino and Reina laughed quietly, and Vala prepared to leave, but Vale closed and secured the door, stating that Issei had not signed the contract and would not be allowed to go until he did. Issei feared he would not emerge from this situation unscathed. Meanwhile, a pink-haired woman watched from behind a pile of fallen figures and laughed softly. Everyone looked up and Fanai's trembled with fear. It was Issei, bearing the jug Ned drive, but this time with fallen angel wings. The nanny's voice echoed through the place, announcing that everyone should prepare to witness the power of her greatest creation. Like a bolt of lightning, Issei seized Phoenix. Magical circles sprang up and chains bound him. Phoenix struggled, but could not break free. Someone shouted for Zaskiel to be released. 3 gunshots rang out, followed by a piercing scream. All who watched were horrified, including the leaders of the Phoenix and Gremory clans. The wounds could not be healed. Suddenly, an organ began to play, and the sound unnerved everyone. Issei, in a sick-sounding tone, said that the music was perfect for his feast of terror. Asia warned that this would end badly and identified the organ piece as a Bach composition traditionally played at a death. No one knew how it would end as that grim music continued. As the macabre piece played, Issei unleashed relentless attacks that ultimately overwhelmed Phoenix and left him incapacitated. Rias, her voice even colder, ordered Issei to finish him, ignoring the pleas of the Phoenix leaders. At the climactic moment of the organ swell, Issei carried out a final, decisive act that ensured Phoenix would not rise again. Afterward, Issei explained that Phoenix had fought to the death for the president and that he had fulfilled that condition. He added that Phoenix had threatened the president, and as a pawn his duty had been to defend her honor. Issei warned the Phoenix leaders not to set foot in his territory and addressed the families requesting the president's hand, insisting that she must choose her own suitor. Everyone present nodded nervously. She laughed and, in a manic tone, warned Issei to prepare because she would return and he would not live to tell it. The woman bristled with fury. Some time later, the scene shifted to a different house. A pink-haired woman arrived at the brown-haired man's home, her clothing stained with red. She told Issei that she had returned and that, at last, they would be together again. She cursed the red-headed woman and vowed to make her pay. The redhead laughed in a sick high voice as she reached her house. She searched the pockets of her skirt for the key and berated herself for losing it, reminding herself that she was the one who would stand by Issei. Since she could not find the key, she decided to enter through the sliding patio window. She slipped inside through the window and declared to the empty room that she had returned. Once inside, Yuno's expression hardened as she noticed the smell of someone else's perfume in the air. Yuno thought that whoever had been here would pay for it. She moved forward with a knife in hand, determined to find the intruder. A voice in her head warned her not to act and to remember a promise. Yuno tensed, about to answer the voice, when 2 figures suddenly appeared. Both were identical to Yuno, one dressed in white, like a pale dove, the other dressed in black, like the darkest night. The 2 figures spoke in unison, their voices echoing through the walls, declaring that they were both her. Yuno, confused and gripped tight on her knife, demanded that they say what they wanted or she would silence them with her blade. The version of Yuno in black accused her of wanting to kill, while the one in white countered that Yuno only wanted to protect her beloved and defend him. The black Yuno struck the white Yuno, and the two of them immediately began to fight. They grappled and exchanged blows, shouting that if one could not have him, no one would. The conflict escalated into a full brawl, and in the middle of it someone opened the front door. The person who opened the door was the brown-haired young man associated with them. He froze, surprised at the sight of Yuno. When he reached out, she shoved him away. At that moment, a defender arrived. Rias appeared and her protective side flared. She let out a cry of anger and stepped forward, her presence fierce with determination. Yuno tried to stop her, but Rias completed a circle of magic and drew a katana. Yuno drew her own blade as well. The room fell into darkness, lit only by flashes from their clashing swords. Sparks flew as the two women dueled, each aware that only one of them might come out of that fight unbroken. Yuno, voice ragged with panic, blamed Rias for having lost Issei and for the broken bond between them. Rias replied that Yuno had never truly been with him, that Yuno had lost her way and Rias had been the one protecting him. Their exchange turned into desperate attacks. They threw objects and struck at each other with all the fury they had. Meanwhile, Issei lay on the floor, unconscious. He drifted through a memory of cruelty from his childhood, recalling how his caregiver had hurt him when he was very young. He reflected with heavy sadness that taking revenge had not brought his family back. He longed for a parent or sibling to be there as he grew up, to share warmth and a sense of home he had never found. He felt the weight of his past and the guilt that followed him for what he had done at 10 years old. Back in the fight, the two women continued with increasing brutality until both swords broke and they were left to grapple barehanded. Their clothes were torn and they caught at each other's hair like wild animals. Yuno found an opening, pushed Rias against the wall and struck her repeatedly. Then Yuno felt something warm on her hands. She realized that Issei had been harmed when he fell and was now seriously injured. Yuno released Rias and cried out for Issei, rushing to his side. But memories of how close she had come to killing him flooded back, and the shock overwhelmed her. She faltered and collapsed, trembling and unable to move. Rias, battered, ran to Issei as well, but Issei's vision faded and for both him and Rias the world went black. A brown-haired man lay on the ground with a wound to his head. As his eyelids grew heavy, he drifted into memories. Issei remembered that it had been many years ago. He and his sister were on a cold plain when he first saw her. A tall, slender woman with pink hair and a striking, penetrating gaze that seemed to look into the deepest corners of a soul. Issei remembered that when she looked at him he felt a shiver, because she was the first person he had seen with eyes so hollow, so devoid of purpose, so lacking in life and hope, eyes that resembled his own. He remembered that he and his sister had been placed together in the same group. Yuno introduced herself as Yuno Gasai, and when Issei heard her voice he felt something stir inside him. Yuno lay on the floor, recalling many moments and everything she had lived with the one she loved. She remembered how he had been the only person to whom Issei had opened his heart, and how he had been the only man who did not disgust her. She remembered the cold nights when they kept each other warm and the private moments that deepened their bond. She remembered how they grew close through shared struggles and danger, how they relied on each other in a world that seemed defined by weapons and violence. She remembered the day her life changed and the last traces of her humanity vanished. Yuno recalled that from the moment she was created she had been treated like a machine. Her earliest years were a blur of being designed to be the perfect girl, every aspect of her life regulated, what she ate, when she slept. That hell was controlled by the people who called themselves her parents, the ones who claimed to love her but never showed a true embrace or gentle words. There were only scoldings and rules. One night, fed up with the relentless control of her existence, the child within her seized what would become her tool and cut the ties that bound her to those who had called themselves parents. Their memory became something she would rather not recall. On that night, under a red moon, something in Yuno changed. She discovered a talent that would later sustain her and, in a way, fill the hollow parts of her life. A talent for using a crimson substance as ink to create fierce, unsettling art that society rejected but she adored. When a small, lonely man named Issei unexpectedly crossed her path, they became inseparable. The two of them grew close, as if made to fit together, and Yuno's cold heart began to feel something she at last recognized as love, the chemical cocktail she had searched for all her life. She could not bear the thought of losing him to others. Everything seemed to go well until a battle with an organized crime syndicate turned everything upside down. Then a hand appeared that ended what they had. Later she would learn it belonged to the Red Dragon. After that, another adversary arrived, Rias Gremory. Yuno could not finish the thought before a streak of motion flew past at great speed and a sharp strike grazed her. Could this be the end of the Crimson Assassin? The confrontation was far from over.